the most views.
Welcome back to the Bourbon and BS podcast, everyone. This is episode 175, part 1. We are honored to have once again in the garage Anne Dimmick from Watershed Distillery. Anne, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's an honor. Got Nate Hale over there as well. I'm Steve Crane. Tonight, we've got some special stuff for part 1 from Watershed Distillery. Very excited. May have had it before, but many of you, if not almost all of you, have not.
This is true because it releases on Friday of this week. Yes.
You've had it before.
I've had it before. I was there when we blended it.
Yes.
So I've definitely had it.
3 of us have had this before.
Yes.
I didn't know if we're allowed to say that or not.
Is that a bit of a flex? I think that's a flex.
I was in a
Steve is used to that. So.
I was out after we were there for Dustin's bachelor party, and just happened to, like, someone said something like, "Oh yeah, Watershed's releasing their new 4-year in their bottled and bond." I was like, "Yeah, it's really good." And it was like the record player, you know, like the jukebox skipping, and they were just like, "Wait, what do you mean?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I've heard it's really good."
Yeah.
I've heard it's really good.
Trying to catch yourself there.
No, I just said it's really good.
No, I think when you guys came in, we had just bottled it.
Yeah.
Days before. Like, in fact, one of these was actually still on the bottling line. Not one of these bottles, but one of
that day.
One of the bourbons was actually still not even completely bottled.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So before we get any further, I do want to thank our sponsors here, Tinder Box at Easton, Altadis USA, and BS Cigar Company. Tinder Box has provided the Perdomo Champagne 10th anniversary. I chose this one actually because I know that you don't smoke many cigars. You may not be doing it tonight unless it strikes you. But it's a milder selection, and it's also a 10th anniversary, which is all over your bottles. See, there's a tie in there.
Very good.
Thank you for the credit. And then, so thank you, Tinder Box at Easton. Altadis USA, we've got the Romeo Julieta, the Reserva Real, another mild selection in case you were going to go and smoke 2 cigars tonight. Kept them a bit mild, but thank you, Altadis and Josh Bentley as well. And then BS Cigar Company, the golds should be arriving into the United States here soon. The silvers are now available, so check them out as well. And also patreon.com/bourbonandbs podcast. Thank you guys for the support. It's been tremendous, and we're hoping to get some more raffle prizes from Altadis and some of our sponsors here coming up to be sending out to you guys each week. But yeah, it's real easy. Patreon.com/bourbonandbs podcast. It helps us do this show, do all the streaming, all that good stuff, fun stuff, and helps make it worth our while. And we appreciate you guys liking, sharing, subscribing, all that good stuff on all the audio podcast listeners, as well as on Facebook and YouTube. And join us on the Bourbon and BS community page, where it kind of continues everything as well. And you're a part of that, I know. We get a lot of good people on that page from all over the world, actually. In fact, so far, I just see a handful of people tuning in so far. Some in Columbus. We got some from Illinois. I don't know if Ray's on here yet, but I know Ryan Jones. He said, go to a Kentucky bar and drink tequila. He was paying attention to our post this last weekend. Nate and I were down with half of the Bourbon and Blondes this last weekend in Louisville. So, yeah, we somehow ended up eating tacos. Bourbon and Blonde. There you go. Elena. And we happened to have Mexican food almost every day we were down there.
Yeah.
And margaritas. I don't know why.
We didn't. Yeah,
Worked out.
We didn't have margaritas the last day, but we went to a Cuban restaurant. So
that's right.
We went to 2 taco places and a Cuban restaurant.
Absolutely.
So
as one does in Kentucky.
Yeah,
Actually, there's a really good restaurant that we would go to after barrel picks at Wild Turkey, and it was definitely a Mexican restaurant.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
And Eddie was the one that told us about it. He's like, "Oh, you got to go here."
It must be something about down there. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's got good. It was good. It's good. It's really good. So yeah, we're hoping to kind of get some of that experience that we also had at Old Forester. We had a great tour there. Highly suggest that one. Angel's Envy we went to, but it was a virtual tasting. Before that, we'd already mentioned it, but we have Anne here as well. So if you guys missed that episode after we went to Watershed, you guys have amazing tours and facilities as well.
We do. We've really, and actually, as soon as we reopened to tours post-COVID, they immediately sold out. So we've added more tours and we've brought on more tour guides. And I think we have tour guides that are as good, if not better, than any tour guides you will find in Kentucky.
It's a
Jen,
bold statement.
well, so here's the
And
thing.
you were our tour guide, so I can't really
Your
argue
tour
that.
was not that great. You
Well,
did not. You
I
had
don't
the
know.
B team.
We got to drink a lot of different whiskeys, so I say it was pretty good.
You definitely had the B team that day.
Hey.
Jen Murley actually runs all of our tours, and she came to us from Rabbit Hole Distillery.
Oh, yeah.
So she actually opened their visitor center. And so, I mean, we have a great group of tour guides. They are all amazing. Jen is really amazing, pregnant with twins right now. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, still gives a great tour. Kentucky girl.
Doesn't sip as much right now.
No.
No. All right. So let's get into this here. So, Anne, thank you for bringing it. We have very exciting news for those that haven't been paying attention to your social media or Watershed social media or a lot of the bourbon community pages as well, because it's obviously just everyone's excited. Like I said, I was in a bar and someone mentioned it just randomly, and
That's great.
Yeah, so amazing. Let's start talking about what the two featured bottles in front of you are, and they cannot even see this, by the way.
Oh,
yeah,
because I brought extra stuff.
Oh.
I know. Well, part two.
Kind of keeping it secret, but whatever. All right, go on.
Yeah. So on Friday, Watershed, we are in our 11th year. We are one of the largest distilleries in Ohio, if not the largest, and producer of the best-selling Ohio-made bourbon. We are actually launching our first ever bottled and bond bourbon. And at the same time, we are releasing it's kind of an evolution in our bourbon, our new Watershed Distillery 4-year bourbon. Our bourbon has been a 90 proof. And when it first came on the market years ago, we've always made our bourbon 100%. It was released at just 2 years old. Over the years, we've gotten it older and older. So each batch, we always had a goal of getting at least a 4-year age statement on it. So now our bourbon portfolio is going to be fully age stated. We'll still have our LTOs coming out later, some of our barrel finish.
LTO meaning?
Oh, yeah, limited time offer. So like a seasonal special release.
Call now.
Sorry.
I like it. I like it.
Back up. Just LTOs. That's what we call them. The things that come out like once a year for a special occasion. But these two are actually going to be available, assuming we made enough, every day. So
Really?
Yes. So these are coming out Friday.
This Friday in Ohio and
it will
or just
launch,
Ohio.
Actually, Georgia will be. They already have their shipment.
Okay.
So it'll be going really in all of our markets. We're in 8 markets. So Illinois will be getting it. I know you mentioned somebody was watching.
Ryan Jones out there.
Yep.
He's still out there right now.
Chicago will be seeing this as well. Michigan already has their shipment, so you'll start to see it in agencies in Ohio and beyond. Probably starting next week. We're going into a holiday weekend.
No kidding.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's the Friday of a holiday weekend. You might see it.
If you see it, it's probably going to be gone by the holiday on Sunday.
It might be.
So, all right. So, what do we have in the glass?
Right now, we're actually starting out with our bottled and bond.
Okay. And now, what does that mean exactly for those out there that don't know what bottled and bond? Do you want to give a little bit of that?
Sure.
Right.
Bottled and Bond Act of 1897. It was actually America's original truth in advertising law, and it states that a bourbon, if it actually carries the bottled and bond mark, it was made by a single distiller, aged in a bonded warehouse at least 4 years. It's barrels from a single season, and a season is defined as January to June or July to December, and bottled at 100 proof. So it's a pretty special for a craft distillery. There's not a ton of bottled and bond out there.
Right.
So it's something that we've been working on for several years, had a goal of releasing this. And it's this particular, our bottled and bond is 100% distilled, aged, and bottled by us. And it's a selection of some of our favorite barrels. So we had fun making these.
That's amazing.
Want to be there like the weeks where we're blending.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
Call us.
Good idea.
Yeah, it's a good idea. It's a good job to have
if it's available.
Yeah.
So the bottled and bond also, and this is something that I encourage you guys to go to like Watershed, and even locally here in Columbus, if you're in the area. I know you guys all get along in the area.
We do.
High Bank was another one that we recently had visited as well. Actually, before we visited you, and then you were our tour guide, and I got home. Nate drove me home, thankfully.
Okay. I'm glad.
It was, yeah, thank you. We don't have to get into the details there. However, I was going to say, taking these tours, you get to learn a little bit more about all this stuff. Like I said, Nate and I were just down with Elena from Bourbon and Blondes in Kentucky, and, you know, Angel's Envy, especially Old Forester, they went into it because they have a Old Forester 1897.
Yeah.
Their bottle and bond. And they talk about a lot of times the reason the government got involved in this is because there was so much counterfeit.
Yeah.
You know, like people were coming into town back in the late or mid to late 1800s, and they called it whiskey, they called it whatever. They weren't doing the true things. It was shocking to hear some of the stuff that you know, allegedly was happening to give it the color, as opposed to doing it for the, you know, 4 years or just any years.
The Rusty Nails was the one.
Rusty Nails got me too. Yeah.
Because I knew about using the spit from spittoons.
Like the spit was what gets me.
I knew about that, but I had not heard the Rusty Nails before.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is something that the government did. Now, we have a lot of regulations, and we talk about it in the cigar industry as well, and you guys doing it now, is that you kind of want some regulation, but not this overreach stuff. But it sounds like at the time, I mean, it was more or less the Wild West, literally. And it was just all things were going through it. So prior to obviously Prohibition, and that's when I think the overreach may have happened, in my opinion. But this was something that seems that it needed to happen. So it's cool that you guys are doing something almost not only legitimately, but also as a tribute to the history of the spirit of bourbon and whiskey. So I think it's amazing. So I'm going to take a sip here.
Sure.
Cheers.
I'm excited to hear the tasting notes on this one.
Well, and Steve, if you noticed, like I have another little Glencairn over here that I poured a little bit into.
Okay, is that the water?
No.
Okay.
So if you remember yesterday when we did our Old Forester test, so we did our tasting with them and we did their 4 whiskey row, and the lady was very specific to make sure we saved some of the 1870 in our glass, and then we did the other 3, and then came back to the 1870, and it tasted completely different because it had been sitting there.
Yeah, that was interesting
in the air.
If if we're doing blindfolded, I would have thought that someone poured something different into our first glass.
Yeah,
it's funny because I noticed the same thing. Like when you first open, and I've seen this with some bottles that, and it goes both ways too, where sometimes you'll try it and you're like, oh, not so thrilled about this one, and then you come back to it and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And then I can think of one single barrel in particular, and as it went down and I stored it and I didn't want to drink it because I liked it so much, and then when I came back to share it with somebody, it just wasn't what I remembered. So, and
that's always something you can, like when you're eating or drinking, obviously before that too, but all right,
for sure. It is my first whiskey of the day.
Congratulations, you made it to almost 8 o'clock. Almost 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
I love the nose on this too. Like very like soft, fruity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like not heavy,
sweet,
dark
but
fruits,
not
like
much.
not stone fruits, but like me, there's a little bit of a banana on the
Absolutely.
nose.
Do you get apple? Like a little bit of apple.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
That's what I was
but
saying, like
more
sweet.
like not a red delicious, more like a
not
honey
like
crisp.
That. Yes. Yeah. Something that's like a little bit sweet tart.
Yeah. Like a honey crisp or a Granny Smith, that kind of tartness.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good.
That's your review. It's good.
Good viscosity with that one.
It is. I mean, it's hot today here in Columbus, so I'm already sweating a little bit, but it's got a nice warmth to it.
It's an easy sipper.
It's an easy sipper. For me, there's no burn. There's no like any. It's got that little bit down in the chest, but it's good, neat. That's for sure.
Well, and the other thing that I noticed on this, again, based on some of the experiences you and I had the last few days, is when
Sounds
you
weird when you say it like that.
Oh,
Sweet,
sorry. Some of the whiskey experiences.
Still weird,
but
could be weird.
When you have like some people when they first get into drinking whiskey or bourbon in particular, they tend to start with lower proofs, but the higher proofs one are going to have more flavor because they're more oily. And they made the analogy of like, your grandma cooking soup at home versus buying the can. The can's watered down. It doesn't have all that oil, but The homemade stuff, after it's sitting there, like the oil, you can see it rising to the top, and it's going to have a lot more flavor. If you add water to it to proof it down, like with whiskey, you're going to lose a little bit of that flavor. So if you want to go for flavor, go for higher proofs.
Barrel strength is pretty fun.
Barrel strength is fun.
Yes, it is.
It is fun. It does still have a little bit of that it's not as much fruit. It's almost, now I'm kind of, I don't know if I'm sounding nerdy or whatever, but I mean, it's like a little bit of that baking spices or whatever.
A little bit of that, like on the finish.
Yeah, that's what on the finish.
Do you get some dried cherry kind of as it develops?
No, you say that, yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say some floral notes to it. Dried cherry, I wasn't thinking that immediately, but who knows? Psychologically, now I'm going to be thinking.
Yeah, now you say it. Now I do a little bit.
Now
I do a little bit. This is good.
We're working on final tasting notes yesterday.
Yeah.
There was a lot of debate going on.
What are you at? Where are you at with it?
So the apple.
The apple.
Was the really
That's
like the Honey Crisp apple, or like a Granny Smith, something that's like definitely a sweet tart sort of apple. I get that off the nose. And then not necessarily like not maple or brown sugar, but like honey. You know, like a drenched,
it's sweet,
wild
but like a soft
honey.
Sweetness.
Yes.
It's not as bold as say a molasses type of sweetness or.
And I'm not
caramel.
getting as much. Yeah, it's not caramel, the vanilla. There's not. I mean, a little oak, but it's not like this like classic. That's what it's unique. You know, it's unique. It's not going to be your typical. You know, again, vanilla. You know, butterscotch, caramel. It's not what you think. Like this is nice. Yeah, it's unique. And like you said, it's an easy sipper, which is good and also maybe dangerous for depending on who's drinking it.
Yeah. And it really, when you think about the barrels that you have the 6-month period that you can choose barrels from, and as you start to go through and taste them, it's amazing how different distillate batches, there's variation. There's so much. I mean, you see it when you taste single barrels, but you start to see in different kind of lots of barrels, like, ooh, so the December ones seem to taste like this, and then there'll be common threads, and then variation between the barrels. So it's really, it's a mark of where this distillery was and what they were producing at that point in time. It's pretty interesting.
I mentioned it last week because I learned it from you when we did the tour about when they say a single distillate season. Like I'd always heard that with bottled and bonds, but never had it explained. You actually explained to us. So it's that January to June, July to December. And I mentioned it last week. I was like, so something that was distilled today could not be blended with something distilled next week or tomorrow in July. Because they're separate seasons, even though they're back-to-back days.
Right.
Can't be used together.
Yeah.
But the good thing with that though is you can then it gives you that opportunity, as you were just alluding to, take a January distillate and a June distillate, put them together and see how that tastes.
Oh yeah. Totally different.
Yeah. So it can open up the possibilities for some really good flavors and different profiles.
Definitely.
What is the strategy of that, if I can ask? Like, obviously you can't do the 2 different seasons together, but I mean, when you guys are selecting all of this, is there a strategy, or is it purely just trial and error? Or, I mean, I know there's a little bit of more knowledge base to that, but I mean, how do you pick this, right? How do you pick batch 1 out of how many barrels?
Out of
when you're doing this project, is there a number of barrels specifically that you guys are utilizing or choosing from? And you say your favorite barrels sometimes.
So the number of barrels, it depends on the season.
Okay.
So it depends on the decisions that were made more than 4 years ago, basically, and how many barrels were put away. So first you identify which season you're going to pull from. And then we also have our 90 proof blended bourbon. So we're blending for a signature flavor profile there.
Right.
And we also have our single barrel program. So you kind of go through and we're tasting barrels all the time as they're starting to come of age. Like really we start tasting in the, 3-year mark and sort of we also make old fashioned and we do some finished bourbons.
Yeah.
We do a lot of things.
Yes.
So
you do.
it kind of going through. For this one, we are, I should say, Greg has kind of his favorite barrels, and Greg likes, sometimes we don't even always agree. I'll be like, this is great for the single barrel program, but he definitely likes very approachable, interesting, complex, but approachable and easy sipping. So that is kind of where we go with a lot of these. But you go through, you taste all the barrels by themselves, you make notes, and then you start playing, basically.
Okay.
Is that how you decide, like, when you're tasting a barrel, like whether this is going to go into, your single barrel program, your blended, or your bottled and bond? Is that when that decision gets made, or is it later on?
So that gets made. We're getting all deep into it, basically. If you go to Greg's office, but so
we have you here, so we need to take advantage of the knowledge.
Yeah. So you start tasting, and everybody makes their notes separately, and you start kind of putting them in groups. Like, I think this would be a good one for this, and I think this would be a good one for this, and but the ones that kind of have that signature, like really easy drinking, you got the sweetness, you have the spice, it's not overpowering, just that balance, those favorite, like, this is it, they get put in the bottled and bond group. And then we kind of go through and start, because you might have a whole bunch of favorite barrels and you put them together and it's just not magic. And you might, so it's
the same thing in the cigar industry. Like, they have a whole recipe menu, like this tobacco tastes like this tobacco tastes like that. Like, oh, I like these two flavors, put those two together, and it's like, no, that cigar doesn't taste
wasn't
good.
It. Yeah. So it's, if you could predict and it were just a formula, you would do that, basically.
It'd be easy that way.
Yeah.
I think you guys are on, like, for those that are more cigar smokers, where you can, there's a way that, for example, and you guys are kind of doing it with that, where you taste the barrels and then you're blending the barrels, how you think they're going to marry together a little bit. But with tobacco, it's like you will smoke just the wrapper leaf, just so you know what that tastes like. It's kind of like, what salt tastes like. You know what I mean? When you're making it, what certain spices taste like, what certain meats and marinades, all this stuff. Like, that's where it's with tobacco. The farming is there. You guys are already getting the grains, if you will. And now you're sitting on that gamble of for this example, 4 years, where you're going back to it and everything like that, where you're going to put it in your warehouse or rick house, all this good stuff. I mean, there's a lot of gamble.
Yeah.
A lot of gamble on the product. So it's interesting to see where you guys are at with that part of it, where, I mean, you're right. It would be great to be there during that blending process.
Yeah. So that part is fun, but also kind of near the end, you do some blind batches where everybody kind of takes the blends and you put them out there and you just number them. And actually, our head distiller, he's famous for this. He'll put out samples and mark them A, B, and C.
Yeah.
And then he'll have a different table. And the A and the B and the C are like different at different tables.
Knows.
Oh, he knows. He has a key. So you can't discuss with other people. Oh, he's great. So
that's kind of a cool idea.
It is. And then you also want to be true to the flavor profile that you've already established. So in the blind tasting, you'll also put, the batch that you've already made of that. That'll be one of the samples.
Okay.
Yeah. So you want to see, like, okay, are we still in the family basically here?
Yeah.
From a blind standpoint, when you don't exactly know.
Completely blind.
Yeah.
How many people are on this committee, if you will?
I mean, really, Greg's the final say.
Understood. But do you have like a team, like a focus group?
We have several people. So we have some really great people in our production team. We have our head distiller, Aaron. We've got Greg. We have some really
Do you get to be
talented
a part
people.
of this?
Yeah.
Are you one of the talented people that
I don't know that I'm talented, but I get to be a part of it.
Right.
I get to be a part of it.
Do you have, and this is just curious, I don't know if this is legal or not, but do you have like people that are in the bourbon community that are part of a focus group, if you will, that aren't employed by the distillery? do you guys do something like that? Like a true focus, like marketing group where
that would be the best like volunteer job in the world.
I agree.
It's a good idea.
I'm not asking. I don't know if honestly, I don't know if I have the palate. I'll give you my opinion on that, but I do know people. We have some like there was someone that we mentioned was it Sunday? I don't even know what day it was. It's a long day, long week. But so like Bob Brayer's been on the podcast, and I'm not volunteering him, although he'd probably do it. But I don't know if you have some of these, you know, who's I guess of the more local, sometimes national bourbon community that are well known for their collections, their palates, or whatever it is. And I'm not saying Bob, for example, but that's just someone that comes to mind. That do you ever do those types of focus groups? Are you allowed to say that? Is it just all
Probably would be
employees?
secret if we did it, but
So I'm not going to get an answer.
we do have a really great team that's there, and we're at a point where we have like a lot of us have worked for other distilleries.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And then the things that they can't see on here is also an example of something from the different parts of the organization.
Yes. I don't know what I'm allowed to say.
You can say whatever you want.
Okay. We brought some other bourbon too. Yeah.
All right.
Which Steve and I have sampled. I bought a bottle of.
That really is good.
So locally made Ohio bourbon. How do we like it?
I like it a lot. Like I said, it's unique. I like it. It's an easy sipper. This is something. What is the MSRP going to be?
Our regular Watershed Distillery bourbon, our 90 proof, is staying $39.99. And then our bottled and bond will be $49.99.
Yeah.
And then we have an allocated single barrel program that is $59.99. And that's not a regular shelf item. That's
special.
That's limited.
It's LTO, I heard.
Well, kind of. Yeah.
That's you got to go.
Allocated.
You got to go. That means you got to go to their bottle shop.
So that is something that we just started doing. We've been doing single barrel selections. Well, they've actually, Watershed was doing it before I even worked there, but they were mostly being bottled at 90 proof. They were being used, it was mostly bars and restaurants. And so last year, in the second half of the year, we started doing some barrel strength, single barrel selections. And in reopening the restaurant, I'm just going to dive in. We'll talk about also, we have some single barrels.
It's your night. Go ahead.
Okay, there we go. There we go.
Move them here.
We actually got the opportunity.
Here.
Oh yeah. What are we doing?
Just comment. So my Weller Wednesday is going to change to Watershed BIB.
Oh, we appreciate that. Thank you, Todd.
All right.
Should be Watershed, yeah. So we did this really fun thing where our chef, Jack, who runs Watershed Kitchen and Bar, one of the best restaurants in Columbus, he and his team tasted through several barrels, selected a single barrel. The ladies of the distillery, so I mentioned Jen, who runs our tours. Jennifer, actually, she's in administration and she's in like every bourbon club there is. So fun. And there are a bunch of people, but we have some big fans of bourbon in there. The ladies of the distillery selected a barrel, Sugar and Spice. And the distillery team, Aaron Harris, our head distiller, and his team actually selected a barrel. And they asked, so do we have to pull from, we pulled out 12 or so that the kitchen and bar team and the ladies selected from. And I said, no, you guys are the distillery team. So as long as it's at least 4 years old and it's straight bourbon and you can get to it, go for it. Well, they were hiding this barrel because
which one?
King Chambers.
Oh,
so they selected King Chambers, which is, it's actually, theirs is 5.5 years old. It's amazing. It is so balanced. It's actually the highest proof one. And I think if you were drinking them blind, you would not know.
It doesn't, higher proof. I was just having a conversation with someone that, just like a cigar, stronger does not mean that necessarily it's going to have this like burn or spice or pepper or anything like that. It can be very smooth.
Right. So
we have a comment here. We had one that says from Greg Gillette. He's going to dinner tomorrow night.
Oh, thank you. Sugar and Spice, the ladies' pick.
And this is Mark Eberly.
Oh, Mark is actually one of our amazing tour guides. Thank
Yes.
you, Mark.
All 3 single barrels are amazing.
So-
I'm slightly biased, but the sugar and spice was my fave.
Yes. If you like the traditional Russell's Reserve, like those G warehouse, like the old, deep, bold. If you like rare breed, you will like sugar and spice, where it's just hot.
Did you have influence on that one?
and I was there.
I know.
Yeah, for sure.
She's
But
one of the ladies of the
I'm
team.
one of the
Yeah.
ladies.
Of course she did.
But
Because
So that one
she
was
told
great.
us on the tour like that was the one that you were like, oh, this is amazing, and then
yeah.
you tasted one of the other ones, you're like, damn it,
But
which
they're-
ended
they're
up being the bottle
so-
that I bought.
They are so different.
Yes, very.
They're so different, and it's kind of like personality. And
Yeah.
actually, I was talking about these single barrels with Bob Brayer, who you mentioned, and he likes sugar and spice better than King Chambers. And he actually said, this is the 401k, and that one is the, that's like the party one.
Yeah,
It's the good time.
it's the time. Yeah. Should we
Yeah.
sample something? Or are we going to move on to
We
the?
could. You know what?
should we
Before we go
I was going
into
to say.
barrel
Yeah.
strength,
Yeah. That's what I was
Do
thinking.
this.
why don't we try
The brand new.
You've already got a
our
whole glass
water?
of-
Well, but then we went over. I actually poured it into that, but we went into bottled in bond first.
Well, because that's what we were wanting to
Yeah.
highlight.
So this is our Watershed Distillery bourbon, now with an age statement, and it is actually a blend
Mm-hmm.
of 3 different bourbons.
Mhm.
So it's actually a blend of 4 to 6 year old barrels, some of which were finished in our Ohio apple brandy.
Some of the barrels were.
Some of the bourbon was actually finished in
Right.
our Ohio
Okay.
apple brandy
Yeah.
barrels.
Okay.
So it's a blend of our straight bourbon, our barrel strength that we finish in Ohio apple brandy barrels, and then some barrels that we tasted and found from a partner distillery.
Partner
Yes.
distillery.
So it's blended towards a certain flavor profile.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is batch number 1.
It-
No. Batch.
Actually, so each bottle is numbered.
I see that. Now.
We used to actually handwrite the batch numbers on there, but each bottle is numbered. So that's what do we got?
209.
Bottle number 209.
Yep. 209. 90 proof.
And that's the 1 liter bottle.
hmm
Is that going to be the standard size bottle?
No, it's just that's what I grabbed off my desk
That
before I
works.
came.
That works.
That was the first size we bottled, so that my sample happens to be a liter.
There you go.
You guys
Yes.
still doing the bottling on that one?
Oh, we do all of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're just getting that third other barrel
Yes.
from that. All right.
So it's sourced, and then it's also aging in our warehouse as well. It's there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very
And
cool.
that is also tasting through barrels. And so
very,
what you'll
very different on the nose than
I
the
know.
bottled and bond.
and this one is also 90 proof.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I get a little bit more sweetness on the nose with this one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This one is kind of the honey. A little bit of oak.
A little bit. That's more of a.
Really,
Go ahead.
I was going to say bright
Yeah.
with like a creaminess to it.
I was gonna say creaminess,
hmm
kind of like that butterscotch type stuff.
Yeah.
It's more of your It's more of your classic
Yeah.
everyday bourbon.
I
And
like
that's
how
not a negative thing saying everyday bourbon.
No.
It's one that you can, again, you said 39.
Yep.
So I mean, it is your everyday bourbon price
Mm-hmm.
nowadays. So it's definitely. That's also easy drinking. Not quite as warm as the bottled and bond, in my opinion.
No.
Definitely creamier, like you said. What do you think, Nate?
No, what I really enjoy about both of them, I was expecting it from the bottled and bond because I'd had it when we did the tour.
hmm
So I wasn't sure with the blend being 90 proof, but it still has this very nice, thick, oily viscosity to it.
Mhm.
That it does.
So the flavor just coats your entire palate.
Yeah.
And that's what I think also helps kind of give you that smooth
Mhm.
texture and character to the whiskey, because it's not just hitting one specific area, it's just coating everything, and it just kind of lingers there a little bit.
Yeah. Do you get a little bit? This is not.
Oh, here we
So
go.
wait, we have somebody on our sales team who actually, when I worked for Wild Turkey, was our Ohio brand ambassador for Wild Turkey.
Okay.
Guy has a great palate.
Okay.
Tommy. And he stopped in the office to pick some stuff up. And I'm like, give me your tasting notes on these. You know, I want to double check. And he actually said one that I really like. Do you like black tea? Like a sweetened black tea, like a
Sure.
a really good one. You can kind of get a little bit of that complexity mid palate.
Wow.
I don't know. Go back to it. Try it.
I don't know about black tea. I don't
No?
drink much black tea.
Mm.
I drink unsweetened green tea, not sweetened black tea. It's a little
Okay.
opposite of my profile.
A little bit of tea. I don't know.
It does. I mean, again, it's weird when, I mean, and again, I'm not too bright, I guess, but thank you for agreeing. I just think that, yeah, when you say notes like that, it does all of a sudden you almost search for it and your brain fools you in thinking that. But I'd love to have a guy like Tommy on here to kind of explain how his brain works without all that and how he's evolved his palate to, or if it's just like, oh, I just take a sip and I just decipher it all.
Yeah.
Because I think it's different for everyone. And it is about trying different things because, again, just even these two bottles, I understand that different barrels. I understand that it's, 100 proof and 90 proof. I understand they're different products, but at the same time, well, let me ask you, when you're looking at like the mash bill, typical mash bill on these, now this one does, the other one did not have the brandy barrels, the apple brandy barrels involved, or did it?
It did not.
Right. So there's one factor that obviously is going to change what we're tasting.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, do you have a given mash bill for what we're dealing with in these bottles?
Do.
Okay.
So we have a mash bill.
Right.
It's a higher rye mash bill.
It's higher rye.
Yeah.
But I mean,
21% rye.
Is it consistent throughout all the barrels?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, when we first started years ago, basically when we first started making bourbon, it was actually a 5 grain. We were milling grain on site. There was a mill out back
That's
up
right.
until
I remember you saying that.
Not very long ago. And it was a pot, a pot still.
Mm-hmm.
We actually upgraded to a column still in 2016, 2017, somewhere in there. And so there was a bit of a transition period. And during that time and dialing it in, they actually had Dave Pickerel come in a few times. So he consulted Nicole Austin, who was working for him at the time.
And who are these people for those that don't know?
So Dave Pickerel, he was Maker's Mark and he was Whistle Pig. And I mean, I have Hill Rock on my desk that has his signature on it.
Big name.
He's got lots of stuff.
Yeah, he's got a resume.
Yes. And Nicole, she's at Dickel right now, right?
Tell me.
I think so. Yeah. But
she's
very well regarded in the industry. Great. And, so there's been help along the way and kind of dialing it in and dialing in processes. And there's, bourbon, it's a culmination of so many different choices along the way.
Right.
And it's when people, have a story like, oh, we found such and such as recipe. It's so much more than a mash bill.
Yeah.
It's where you got your grains from and how you're actually grinding them. And is it coarse or is it fine or is it, and what's the still that you're doing it in? What are the cook temps that you're doing it at? Yeah. What's the yeast that you're using? Where are the barrels from? What are they charred to? Where are you aging it? It's
even with
even
with that, like I had mentioned to Ian Anderson earlier, because he was asking when you were talking about at the 3-year mark, you guys start tasting, figuring out what's going to be what. Yeah. Like when you guys first put it, like, yes, you can sit there and say, okay, it's at the top of the aging room, it's going to age a little quicker because of the heat. It's going to have this characteristic. Lower on the ground, it's going to have this characteristic. But that still depends on the seasons. Like if it's a more mild season, those barrels aren't going to expand and contract as much. If it's a very extreme season, it is going to expand and contract more.
Yeah.
But you can't predict that for the next 4 or 5 years. So you still have no idea, so you can make the same mash bill for every single product and you still don't know what's going to taste like what.
Not exactly. Do you remember, did you guys ever try the Wild Turkey Master's Keep 17-year? It was the original Master's Keep that came out.
Freddie Burke probably has, because he's got all those Wild Turkey Master Keep ones.
So it came out years ago, but it was actually wild turkey, and it was aged not in their regular rick houses. It was in cinder block warehouses instead, and it got moved several times, and it was bottled at very near barrel proof, and it
Really?
was in the high 80s. It actually lost proof. It was the best example of where you can take a distillate and age it differently,
Mhm.
and you would never know that it came from that distillery. And so, so we're aging right here in Columbus, Ohio, and we have a warehouse. We don't have, the open air rick houses.
Right.
And we found there's something kind of magic that happens like right around that 4 or 5 year mark with our barrels. Like, ooh, this is pretty fun. But it's kind of, everybody has their own thing.
We learned a little bit about that yesterday, again, when we did the tour of Old Forester, because they moved back into their old building in 2018.
About almost 100
so
years later.
So they still, age their barrels out in the old school rick houses, but right there on Main Street in downtown Louisville, they have a section of their tour and distillery right there that they're putting barrels in, and it's actually climate controlled. Whereas the rick houses are not climate controlled. It's all dependent on the seasons and on the weather. This is going to be climate controlled. And so someone in our group had asked our tour guide, like, well, what are these going to be used for? What are they going to be? And she goes, we have no idea, because we don't know, because this is the first time we're doing a temperature controlled.
Right.
So theoretically, the barrels at the top should age exactly the same as the barrels at the bottom. But it's
more
not
or less,
it's
more
not
or
the
less.
traditional rick house where it's different temperature every single day, every single season. This is the same temperature every single day.
Wow.
So they don't know what it's going to do.
So your warehouse, for everyone out there, I mean, is it climate controlled?
It is somewhat climate controlled.
Okay.
We don't get below 40 degrees in the winter because it's actually where our bottling line is. And so it's part of a,
Can't do that,
bigger, we're actually in our original location. We've just expanded out within that location. So yeah, definitely. It's in the city, industrial.
Do you have those?
I used
those
to live
sweet
right
spots?
down the street from you.
Yeah.
From that distillery.
Do you
There's a ton of
have like sweet spots in the warehouse on where barrels are aging differently?
We have,
Because there is still, I mean, how many
I think they do based on the guys that pick these
well,
barrels.
hang on. How many how many rows up are we? Like how many stories, if you will?
3, 4. Well, we actually switched to vertical barrels.
Yep.
So if anybody comes to a tour,
Which was interesting to hear, in my opinion, because
if anybody comes to a tour at Watershed Distillery, we actually show you where and how we actually make everything. There's no like hidden back rooms or whatever, except for my office and all the bottles and that sort of thing.
naturally,
But you'll see that we've actually switched from the horizontal barrels to the vertical barrels, and it's a palletized warehouse. And so they are stacked.
that was really interesting to see that.
4 high right now.
I was gonna say 4 or 5 off of
4 or 5.
recollection in the early part of the tour.
Yeah. But
yeah, because someone did ask about
better.
Yeah, someone asked if that was going to change how it aged in that.
Mark Everly says 4 pallets high.
Okay, there you go. Thank you, Mark.
He wants to say that on the tour.
Yeah.
Well, because the person that asked
tour guides are better than my tour. Way better.
The person in our group that had asked it, like they were thinking, well, if it's laying down, it's touching, the sides of the charred barrel.
Yeah.
Well, even the lid's charred too, right?
It is.
So even if it's vertical, like now it's touching the sidewall, and then it's coming as it evaporates out, it's coming off the lid. If it's laying down, it's touching the lid. It's not going to touch part of that wall. So there's still always going to be parts of that barrel that aren't touched at any given time.
What was the explanation? What is the explanation to do it vertically when traditionally it would be on its side?
So I actually asked the master distiller of Old Elk about this. I know why we do it.
Okay.
And I asked him because he did this really cool like virtual tasting. You call in. There were like 10 of us on there. It's the greatest thing ever. And he stayed on for 3 hours. And I asked him about, because they use the palletized warehouse as well. And I said, do you see a difference in how they age? And he said, no, the difference is in the safety to the people that work in the distillery. And he said, nobody who doesn't already have one of the traditional style rick houses is building one today. That's almost unheard of.
Right.
And if you ever get a chance to do a tour at a cooperage, we have a great one right here in Ohio, Speyside Cooperage. I was asking them when we went a couple years ago, what's kind of the split of business? Because they make for the micro distilleries like us, but they also make for the really big distilleries as well. And at the time, he said 5 years ago, vertical barrels were such a small portion of our business. And today it's 80% and growing.
Really?
And so most of the rick houses being built right now are being built in that style. It's safer. It's more efficient for storing.
Yeah.
But
What you'd think, right?
But really that change has been pretty recent. So when you think about bourbon, you're not going to know, I guess, how it's going to turn out for a little while. So I think
typically, 2 to 4 years, right?
Yeah.
Typically.
Science is fun.
Science is especially when there's alcohol involved.
Oh yeah.
You said this is something, this new 4-year product, right? Your everyday product, if you will, when it comes to bourbon whiskey. And again, just remind everyone that Watershed, they make way more than just bourbon and whiskey. But this is something that you said 4 to 6 years, and that's you have to put 4 on that because that is the minimum, the youngest. Right. The youngest barrel, youngest whiskey there in theirs, which is something that's I always thought was very interesting because that's not always the case with other spirits.
It's true.
So it's kind of cool. You might have some older juice in there, if you will, when you see a 4-year age statement. What other products do you guys make before we go on to these other ones?
We make Ohio's #1 selling gin. So 4-Peel gin, which is I like to say it's gin for people that don't know they like gin yet. It's very citrus forward. It's very refreshing. If you have a good tonic, it's the greatest summer drink ever. We also make Watershed Vodka. That's only sold in Ohio, and that's based on, it's made from corn and apples. And then we make an apple brandy, and that is actually, we get fresh crushed apples, so basically like a cider that comes to us, and we distill half of it on our pot still and half of it on our column still and age it separately in 2 different chars of barrels, and then we blend it together. So if you're familiar with rum and you've got the column still and the pot still rum and then the blending process, that is probably like the nerdiest fun thing ever. We could talk about apple brandy forever. We also make Nocino, which is a black walnut. It's actually Nocino season right about now. And so it's a liqueur that's made from black walnuts. And then we age that in bourbon barrels.
It's
and
delicious.
We make
extremely.
Yeah. And then we also have 4-Peel we age in a bourbon barrel. And then we also make Guild Gin, which won best in category at the San Francisco Spirits Competition in 2018. And it's a really delicate, lovely gin that's steeped in chamomile flowers. It's a fun portfolio.
I was going to say,
so many fun things.
Very unique.
But no tequila.
No tequila yet.
No Ohio tequila.
We had someone ask, because you said you're available in 8 markets.
Yeah, I was going to throw that up there.
Is New York one of those?
New York is.
There you go, John.
Yes.
There you go, John.
You asked for a link.
Is that on your guys' website?
A link.
Like to find retailers. I don't know how New York works. Obviously, in Ohio, we have a state website that you can go to, ohlq.com.
Yep.
And there's a way to find all these different by spirit. You know, you just punch in which bourbon and whiskey, right? It says whiskey, and then you type Watershed in. It'll bring up all the Watershed. So check out. I don't know if New York is a state-run agency or not.
It's not.
Okay.
So I'm tagged on all the Facebook stuff. If you just message me,
there you go.
I'll find you our distributor.
Yeah.
We'll figure out where to get it.
Figure it out together.
Yep. Send me a message.
Yeah, John says,
pour one more, light up another. We'll figure this out together. There you go.
Yes.
Wise men once said that.
Yeah.
Drunk man once said that.
No, that one and the same. One and the same.
Yeah.
And then also one of the things you forgot to mention on the end of the table.
Oh,
the bottled old fashioned.
Really cool. This is really cool.
Getting fired tomorrow.
No, you're not.
Yes.
No one's listening anyways.
Watershed old fashioned. So it's funny. I like to say that we are the makers of the #1 selling Ohio-made vodka, Ohio-made gin, Ohio-made bourbon, and the makers of the #1 selling bottled cocktail in Ohio, period, is Watershed Old Fashioned. We actually make it from real bourbon, real sugar, real like cold pressed cherry juice from the same farm where we actually get our apples, and bitters. So orange and Angostura bitters, bitter truth bitters. So it's a ready-made cocktail made from real bourbon. It's not a malt beverage. You just pour it over ice. It's absolutely wonderful.
And it's almost 70 proof.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you would find it in your local liquor store.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, Jody Jacks, who's a big supporter of the podcast. I've been curious about the old fashioned. Get it? I'm gonna say that. Don't be curious any longer. I would definitely recommend picking that up. You literally, I'm of the opinion you put an ice cube or two, maybe a glass, but however you want to do it, or one of the big spheres or big cubes, and pour it over there and call it a day. It's fantastic, and I've always been curious how you talk about like science is fun. How a not artificially sweetened product, like we're all used to, with like the things you get at a gas station, just like teas and like pop and all that stuff. It's like you don't need to shake it, which is mind-boggling to me that contents don't settle. Like what the hell's in it? This type of thing that you guys have done here with all natural ingredients, is that correct? With the sugar and everything else, or
I mean, yeah, the bitters are actually and they're a high quality brand.
It's just amazing to me,
but it's a very good brand.
It's amazing to me, and Avi says add the Luxardo cherries and orange peel, and it's great.
You can. There's already Ohio cherry juice in there.
That's what I was going to say. There's cherries already in it.
You might not want to sweeten it up that much.
It's delicious, Sean.
I mean, I don't like mine as sweet, and I'm a big fan of Luxardo cherries.
Glass with water. Yeah. Can Sean try the old fashioned?
Oh, absolutely.
He's going to go get a glass.
Get some ice.
I was going to say.
Pour it over ice.
So be quiet, because Tony's already freaking out in there. I think he's already eating the crate. So
last week,
it's okay.
Most
of the house is still standing.
Last week, my wife had wanted to try it, but she also saw an old fashioned recipe that used maple syrup as the sweetener, and I had just cracked a bottle of rye that I had. So I took an ounce and a half of rye, a teaspoon of Ohio maple syrup, a couple dashes of bitters, and then I poured the Watershed Old Fashioned, both in the separate.
With all that, separate glasses.
Both in the separate glasses
with
an ice cube.
Yep.
And then blindly handed her both glasses.
Wow.
And she thought the one I made, was the Watershed, but she liked the one that was actually Watershed.
So she thought that was the more high quality, and the one that you made was like a She liked a bottled cocktail. She
liked the Watershed Old Fashioned more because it didn't taste as alcohol forward.
Yeah.
But she thought because of the maple syrup, it was the one that I had made.
It's just very balanced. In the summertime, if you're having people over, or especially at holidays, we sell so much of it. It's great if you're making your own cocktails, but if you don't want the hassle and the mess and you want a good cocktail, it's a really great option. It's ready to go.
It's ready to go. It reminds me of those old commercials, you know what I mean, where you had a house party you just mentioned, and it's like, man, you've been slaving over this all day in the kitchen and all that stuff, and it's like, what's your secret? And then it's like whatever product they're plugging, you know what I mean, that like the person holds up like a package of what they bought at the store, and it's like, and they're like, like one of those things. That's what this is right there.
We have a little commercial like that on YouTube. It's pretty funny.
I didn't see it, but I believe it.
Well, I also remember the last time Anne was on.
That's exactly it, though.
Last time Anne was on, she brought the 10-year anniversary, the 6-year bourbon that was finished in the Nocino. I still have
that box up there, and I have not gotten rid of it because it's too nice.
Well, so when she was last on, so we here you go, Sean. Here, grab this.
Oh boy.
So we had taken after everyone in the garage had finished that bottle, we still had the regular Watershed bourbon
that bottle actually,
and we started pouring that into a glass and then mixing Nocino in with it.
Right.
And that was amazing. Well, then when we were on the tour a couple weeks ago with Anne, we started doing that with the bottled and bond.
Oh, yeah.
At the very end, we took the bottled and bond whiskey and mixed it with Nocino, and holy shit, That was delicious. Oh my gosh. We're like, yep, just put that in a bottle and sell that.
Or sell 2 bottles.
Yeah.
Suggest it. That's
Right.
fine too. It's good for business.
Black walnut Manhattans. Such
Lights
a great
out.
thing.
Lights out. John Belly, thanks for sharing to all your groups out there as well. And I encourage you guys to do the same. Avi said, I don't know if I missed a comment. He said, kinky couple
I think he's
games.
talking about when I was doing the blind taste test with the drinks. I think that's,
I don't know.
Uh-oh.
Blindfolds were involved. That's fine.
no, they were.
Whatever.
She was just in a different room.
I don't want to talk about it.
I will.
It's kind of like picking barrels.
Yes.
You know,
Kind of like picking
old
barrels.
fashions. It's great.
There you
Yeah.
Speaking of picking barrels.
go. Do we want to drink those or no? Probably.
We can totally drink
Oh,
those. I
that's-
brought them, guys. Yeah.
Always good having Anne in the garage. You pick which one we're going to do. I'm going to just briefly, because I do want to talk about the Perdomo champagne.
Yeah.
But go ahead and pick whichever one you think we should.
Okay. Are we
sample
pouring it out first?
Well, I'll talk about that if
Okay,
you want,
you-
and then you tell.
Yeah.
Okay.
You
ODB
talk.
first.
Thank you.
ODB at first.
So the Perdomo 10th anniversary, obviously it was for Perdomo's 10th anniversary. Nick Perdomo in business there. We are now at, I want to say he's pushing towards his 30th anniversary at this point. He's over 25.
Yeah.
The 20th anniversary I know came out.
Started what, early mid 90s?
Yeah, but I'm just trying to think, the 20th anniversary cigar that he did was probably about 9 years ago. And so, yeah, we're definitely pushing 30 years. It's coming up here. But This is the 10th anniversary, the champagne. This is such a unique cigar in a sense in the marketing of it. It's very popular. It's a milder cigar. It's Ecuadorian, Connecticut wrapper, and then Nicaraguan tobacco, which is what you typically will find with a lot of the Perdomo products based out of Nicaragua. But this is one that it comes not only with, and I just pitched the band. If you got the band, it is everything think champagne, right? So it's got a kind of a yellowish golden band on it. It's very pretty. It says 10th anniversary as well as champagne on there. And then the cellophane, which Nate saved, if you guys can see that, it is a yellowish cellophane. So they do that, and it's interesting because you'll see a yellowed cello on a cigar that's been in a humidor for a long time. Typically, that's going to be from the oils of the cigar kind of coming out, and there's mixed opinions on whether or not it's good. It shows age for sure, typically, and that's, I think, why he did that, but also to kind of give it that champagne bottle just presentation.
Yeah. It sticks out on the shelf with that.
Definitely sticks out. In fact, in the retail industry as well, someone can come in asking for it. They can butcher the brand name. They can butcher everything about it. And they say it came in like this yellowed cellophane. You're like, is that it? And they're like, yep, that's it.
Yeah.
So it's brilliant marketing. We featured the newer one when Nicholas Perdomo III was on. We featured the other 10th anniversaries when we're talking about that, which they just reblended as well as the sun grown as well as the Maduro. And those were now all 6-year-old tobacco. He replaced, there was a 10th anniversary noir. And so this is something that this champagne has basically stayed true for the last almost 20 years now in his portfolio. And it still is one of his best sellers for good reason.
Yeah, I think this was the best seller. And then when they came out with the 10th anniversary sun grown and Maduro,
It had a big pop. And so, yeah, immediately, I'd say long term, this is for a lot of cigar smokers going to be something, especially newer or just more the regular, milder smokers. The reason I picked this one tonight is not only to in a sense, to pay tribute to your guys' at Watershed 10th anniversary. We haven't featured it on here as well, but also sometimes when we're doing the pairings with this, I'm thinking, talking to Anne, she's telling me what she's bringing tonight. And we've done this whole thing where we've had a lineup once with Bob Bray that he just brought a bunch of stuff, right? It was just like random stuff that you can't get anywhere. And we've had these nights where it's just like, all right, I'm going to pick the cigar. We'll see if it goes well with everything. Pick this intentionally because there's still a flavor of the cigar that you get throughout what we've tasted so far, but it is mild enough that I really wanted to highlight what you guys have done recently, at least for us. And I didn't know if you were going to be smoking as well, but it's something that, and that's not peer pressure.
It's okay.
All right. Thank you. But this is something that I just didn't want to, I didn't want it to combat what we were sipping on because of how important some of these all of these bottles really that we're featuring tonight are. So that's something I'll tell you guys that I'm of the opinion that if you really want to you want to smoke a cigar, but you really want to focus on what you are drinking that night, and you don't know whether or not it's going to pair well, I would go with something like this Perdomo 10th anniversary champagne, for the simple fact that it's very unlikely that it'll be offensive to what you are drinking. And it won't have that spice. It won't have pepper. It won't have some of these notes that you're trying to maybe get out of some of these bottles that you're trying that night, whether you're doing a dinner party, whether you're doing it by yourself, whatever it might be, doing a podcast in your garage in Columbus, Ohio, whatever it might be. It's just something that's going to go really, really nicely, or at least, at the very least, you might be overpowered by the whiskeys if you go into like the barrel proofs, but you're still able to enjoy smoking a cigar and have a little bit of that tobacco flavor there. What do you think of this cigar, Nate?
It's a very enjoyable cigar. It's the wrapper on it has got this kind of velvety toothiness to it, which I don't get from a whole lot of some milder cigars. But because it's utilizing a lot of Nicaraguan tobacco, it's not going to be the mildest cigar.
No,
it's in that mild category, but it's still got some flavor to it because of the tobacco that they're using. They're not trying to go out and make the mildest cigar they possibly can. They're going out to make a mild cigar that, just like what you talked about, Anne, with some of your whiskey, it's very approachable. It's a very easy smoking, smooth cigar for someone who's getting into it, but it's still enjoyable for someone who, smokes cigars on a regular basis.
I was going to say, just being around it, it's very pleasant.
Yeah.
It's not, when you think
Got
of
a nice
cigar.
aroma.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And it also, one of the other things I like about it is when I smoke it, I just get this very, very thick cloud of smoke. So that's one of the things that lets me know, okay, that cigar is burning. It's producing a lot of smoke. That smoke is where that flavor is when it's in your palate.
So is that like the viscosity in bourbon?
Yes.
Yes.
The mouthfeel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. Making links.
Like it's got it's because there are some mild cigars, they're just mild to be mild.
Yeah.
And then there are some that I describe as having a creamy texture to the smoke itself. And that's how, we've described some of the bourbons that we've tried, is having that thickness, that thick texture, and that oiliness and that viscosity. That's what the smoke does from a cigar. The more smoke you're pulling in, that's where all that flavor is going to be. So the more smoke, the more flavor you're going to be able to taste out of that cigar.
Yeah, and it's got some of like the nice qualities to it, I think, as well. That, especially now that I'm smoking, we've taken a quick hiatus from sipping some of these great bottles. That it's got that little bit of, I don't know, a cedar, but it's a woodiness there, and a little bit of a light pepper, very light pepper. It's like if you just put a dash of pepper on something, like on a dish, just to give it a little bit more of a depth to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A little bit of a kick, but it doesn't have it's not like doused with pepper.
Now, this is not one of the ones that they are aging in bourbon barrels, is it?
That I don't know. I had this conversation. It's very interesting with Nick Perdomo recently. He was in the shop actually a week or two ago. It was last week. It's all running together right now. But he was saying that they've been doing this since I think 99, like the late 90s, like when he first started. They've been doing this stuff with that, and it's actually with Buffalo Trace barrels, if I'm not mistaken, that he has them ship their barrels to age some of their tobacco in.
Yeah.
Right. So they've been doing this. They haven't really marketed it, but it's something that he does that, and it's not to make them bourbon infused, anything like that.
Yeah.
It's not flavored, but you're actually getting some of that from the barrel by aging the tobacco in there.
I know some of the Habanos that they do have.
So they marketed that now. So in the cigar industry, and we'll get back on the whiskey because I know a lot of people are here to hear from Anne on this, but we
I'm
also
trying to figure out how to share, but I'm old.
And that's,
So I'm like, sorry.
well, we did have Todd Conley says side note, and Todd Conley says side note, happy anniversary to Anne and hubby. So
Oh yeah, we
got
had a
some
20-year
fans,
anniversary
20
this
years.
week.
But so it was interesting that when Camacho was real big. You got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm getting there.
When Camacho started doing like American barrel age, Nicaraguan barrel age, they started because the bourbon craze was going so nuts. Then the cigar manufacturers may have been doing it and may not have been doing it, but now all of a sudden they started putting on the boxes that they were doing all this. And Nick Perdomo was like, I've been doing this for 20 years. So they went through a rebranding on a couple of their lines that have been established that were hot sellers, like the Habano series, like Nate was saying. And they redid everything. They made the bands more beautiful, the boxes more beautiful, really upped all the packaging, which was just fine before. But on those, the boxes, bourbon barrel aged was on the marketing now, on the packaging. And everyone thought they changed the blends, and they were like, no, we didn't. This is what the great blend we've always had, but this is going to help sell it. It was interesting. Side note, and I'd love to get Nick on here, so I'm not trying to spoil it too much, but there was a really cool story where he had been working, he had a working established relationship with Buffalo Trace Distillery. They were sending these barrels, and at one point they literally sent a shipment, and 2 of the barrels were full.
It's like the best day ever.
So, he's got this established relationship, and hopefully we'll get him on remotely, and that's hopefully coming up in the future here or in the garage. We had his son on, and I know Janine's very active on our community page, sharing stuff and liking stuff. But he said, he contacted the distillery. He's like, what do you want me to do with this? Like, I can send them back to you. And they said, it's going to be more trouble than it's worth going back through customs and everything else on shipping full barrels of whiskey back through. He's like, just keep them. And so I'll only say that, and hopefully we'll get him on here at some point here in the upcoming 6 months and find out what he is doing with those 2 barrels as we go forward.
Wow.
So
we had a friend of the podcast that had bought an empty barrel, and it was from Four Roses, and it was something that was like 6 to 8 years, but it was supposed to be an empty barrel, and he's like, there's something sloshing around in here, and he poured out, it was like a gallon of whatever this was in it, and he's like, yeah, I'm just gonna sip on that for a while.
Yeah. Mark Eberly asked now, so again, tour guide at Watershed, how does the champagne compare to Perdomo Lot 23? Lot 23, if he's asking about the Connecticut, I saw Nate, you answered that, it's different. This is, I assume you said this is smoother and creamier. You just said for me, smoother and creamier.
For me, yes.
The champagne is.
Yes.
John Belly out there still listening. Happy to have you on again. Day and night for me. I would say that this is a little creamier. It's interesting with Perdomo, just before we move back to some of the whiskeys and then to part 2, it's when you look at his portfolio, even like the basics, he doesn't necessarily always give a lot of the details on the blend of what seed, what farms they're coming from, where he's getting the tobacco when he's not growing it himself. So you look at it like Lot 23, Connecticut, wrapper, Ecuadorian Connecticut, binder filler, Nicaraguan. You get to this one, the champagne, same thing. So it's just a matter of how is he actually blending this differently. So it's a little bit, it can be confusing, but fantastic because they are very, very particular about what they do on their cigars, just like most of the manufacturers are. But Nick is a great guy. He's a great person in the industry, and I think that he's really pushed a lot of this industry to be a little bit more creative on some of the stuff with the barrels, which is a very related topic to this. He has the one that we did, the 12-year at one point, where it was 10-year-old tobacco that then it was aged 2 years in the barrels as well, called it 12-year.
Yep.
So very creative. It's cool to see the industries combining because they do go so well hand in hand together. All right. Do you want to do the ratings while we get into this? And then we'll do part 2. Does that work for everyone? We're about an hour in now.
Let's
Sure.
rate.
So, Anne, if you feel comfortable.
Yes.
Which
I
whiskey?
didn't mean in general, like in the garage.
I
mean,
do. It's great. It's great.
Blink twice if you need help. Someone commented. No. No. Rating time. You're not smoking the cigar. You kind of gave us an opinion of the aroma of it, but the whiskey in general, and I know you might be biased. You also work for the distillery. You've had a hand in some of the products as well, of just being fortunate to do that. With the new 4-year blended bourbon and the bottle and bond, which I think we should review first, out of 10, where would you put those products just in general compared to what's on the market? However you want to rate it.
You're asking a person on the development team.
Absolutely.
That's
why it's so fun.
We do the same thing with every cigar rep that comes on.
I know.
And the whiskey,
I absolutely love both of these. I am so excited to be able to share them. I'm so proud of what we're doing. Our team is amazing. So I have to give it a 12 because
12 out of 10. Which bottle or both?
both bottles.
Okay.
Well, because they're different. They're totally different,
They
and
are.
they're for different occasions. And yeah.
Okay.
And I love
12
single barrels too.
Which-
I do. It depends on the occasion.
Yeah.
It depends on who you have around and what you're doing, and
Absolutely.
But I'm really proud of these, and I'm super excited for Friday.
I think the upcoming weeks, your social media and the feedback is going to be tremendous, and I think
so too.
that's exciting. That's
Yeah.
exciting to also obviously to lead into years to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we sent out a lot of samples in the last couple weeks, and some different people are, kind of reviewing them, and it's been really exciting to see the feedback from people in the industry that I tremendously admire, and they do know what good bourbon is, and when they're telling you like, oh wow,
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
it's exciting. It's a fun place.
It is.
And I would also rate the cigar. I have to say it's a 9.5
Based on sitting in
because
between two
it's
Perdomo
really
champagnes.
it is very pleasant.
Yeah.
And it's even more pleasant when I'm not smoking it. So I love it. I love it when I come here and we do these. These are fun. But this is actually really great. Like
Good.
Yeah.
All right. 9.5
The
on the cigar.
ambiance. Yeah.
The ambiance.
Yeah.
Of the garage on a cul-de-sac.
Mm-hmm.
You can make anything
Back in the
nice.
garage.
Back in the garage.
Yep.
Nate, how about you? All right. So out of 10, let's give.
I want to take a sip of that
You going back?
bottled in bond that I first poured before we
so
started.
go back to
Okay.
it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Silence. And while you digest that, the cigar, do that first then. Out of 10, the Perdomo 10th anniversary champagne. We're smoking the Robusto size.
So on the cigar, I'm going to give the cigar, I'm going to give it an 8.5. I do enjoy this cigar. I tend to like cigars for the most part that are going to be a little bit more heavier, a little richer in flavor. So like I love the new 10th anniversary Maduro. I really enjoy that cigar. For a while there were some Perdomos that when I would get to about the band, the flavor on the cigar would kind of change. And for my palate, not for the better, but that's what I like about their 10th anniversary series. All three of them, the Champagne, the Sun-Grown, and the Maduro. For me, those three cigars don't have that change. They're very consistent throughout the whole smoke. And that's why like I'm past the band on this cigar and I'm still smoking it because it still has that smooth, creamy texture to it.
Interesting. Okay.
But this is a cigar that like on Saturdays when I'm at the shop open and close, like this is the type of cigar that I would start my day with.
Okay.
Start kind of like how we did the single barrels on the tour, like started out with something on the lighter side.
Yeah.
And then as the day went on, worked up to something a little stronger, especially after I eat. Smoke something a little stronger.
Sure.
But I know this is also a cigar that goes well with a nice coffee or espresso.
It does. It does. Absolutely. So, okay. So now bottle and bond, you've come back to it. Out of 10 on that one.
Bottle. The Russian judge, as he even calls me.
Yeah. Let me have a sip of that.
Okay. Yeah.
Pass that over.
When we were
COVID's mostly over, right?
Yes.
Pretty much.
So when we were on the tour a couple weeks ago, this was the first one that we got to sample. Which again, thank you for allowing us to sample that. A couple weeks before it was released. That was fantastic. I was blown away by the flavor of it, and having this now coming back to this glass, it's a 9.5.
Okay.
Like anyone who knows me knows yeah.
Ray Chester says, "Be honest."
I am.
Be honest.
I am.
Be honest.
I absolutely love this bottle. I love the flavor. It's different from a lot of other bottled in bonds that I've had, even the ones I had over the last few days when we were in Louisville. And I like that it's different. It's not what I am used to with some bottled in bonds, but I absolutely love the flavor, love the texture, love everything about it. There's still that little bit of heat, but sometimes that's a good thing.
You need a little heat.
Yeah.
It's more like
Yeah.
warmth, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's warm. It's not hot.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have that, strong cinnamon on the back
Right.
end of it.
Right.
Mhm.
All right. So how about the new 4-year blended bourbon, which is replacing if you guys are familiar with Watershed, the bourbon that you see, which we don't have that bottle anywhere.
We
but
don't. It's most similar.
It's
to
very
these.
similar to that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have the single barrel and everything, but any of these three,
Mhm.
that's kind of what you guys are used to seeing on the shelf.
Mhm.
You guys have changed it up a little bit. Is it the same color, or is it slightly?
It
So
is the same color.
looks different
I know.
in the camera.
I know. Well, the trim is a little different.
Okay.
You just
A little
clued
darker.
into a huge debate, basically.
God damn it! All right.
It is. The trim color is different, so it's going
It kind of
to
darkens
look
it up
a
on the
little
eyes. Yeah.
different to your eyes.
Yeah.
But we added some extra embossing, and
The logo is a little darker as well, right?
it is, and it's
Okay.
kind of has the Watershed
I didn't-
Distillery, and it calls out what it is, and
I'm trying to get into drama here.
there was a lot of drama.
Jeez, all
but
right. Apologies to
we're
everyone at
really
the,
excited. It
distillery.
kind of looks like the label. We grew up as a bourbon portfolio.
It's more mature,
It's a little bit
like
more mature,
the 4
like
years.
the age
There we
statement.
have it.
There you go.
All right, rating.
So the new, just the regular product, Watershed.
Mhm.
So I was always a big fan of the original. I really do enjoy this offering.
Yeah.
So on the regular bourbon, that's a 9.
Okay.
It's really good. It's very, very smooth. Different flavor profile, even though the heart. I don't know what percentage you're blending of your guys' bourbon, the apple brandy barrel finished bourbon, and then the sourced one. I don't know what the percentages of those are, but it still has this very rich flavor, but yet it's very different
Okay.
than the bottled and bond.
Nice.
So it's very, very enjoyable. And $39.99. I mean, that's a good bottle.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
a good bottle. Like I have no problem spending that on a bottle.
All right, and the pairing, just round it out with the pairing rating.
So, like you said, Steve, went with this cigar because we're really highlighting the whiskeys,
Exactly.
and we knew between the bottled and bond and the single barrels that they were going to have more heat to those, a little higher proof. But that's what we wanted to highlight. So as far pairing, I'm going to do an 8 on the pairing,
Okay.
just because, like, even when I go back to the cigar, I can still taste the cigar.
Right.
The cigar is not taking anything away from the whiskey whatsoever, but the whiskeys do overpower this particular cigar just a little bit. Like if you did something a little bit more medium or Maduro, like that, the flavor, the richness, those might go a little bit better together.
Okay.
Mhm.
I want to say first and foremost, with these products, with Watershed Bourbon, which is all it said before, correct?
Yes.
So Watershed Bourbon at $39.99.
Mhm.
Support local, all of that good stuff. Knowing the people, and obviously Greg was on the podcast before. Great thing for the bourbon community, especially, and also other spirits, but just for Ohio. I mean, you rattled off all the number ones that you guys are at now. You're the awards you're winning and all of that. And I assume, or I would predict that these products will be winning awards shortly. Hopefully, right? Rightfully so.
They're being entered.
They're
as
being
we speak.
entered. We will find
We're
out.
excited.
We will find out. You say, like with the marketing behind the 4-year blended bourbon, you've grown up. That's kind of how I see these products in a sense, because you guys didn't start with bourbon, right? It was the gin.
It was. They were making bourbon from the very beginning, but it's
Product
an aged
wise,
product,
right?
So it was in barrels.
It was something
In the
that
back.
I looked at
Yeah.
Watershed, and I'm being completely frank and honest with it. I liked Watershed Bourbon at $39.99 before. I would want to have it on my bar. It wouldn't be my daily.
Yeah.
These two products are, especially, just I'm going to focus on the one that's replacing your current product in the portfolio.
Mhm.
This is more balanced to me. This is a more complex, to me, bourbon. It's a more complex and balanced at the same time, where before the product, it it wasn't as balanced. There were some more pronounced notes. It was something that I could drink neat. Sometimes I'd open it up with a little ice to balance it out, or not ice, excuse me, water, a couple drops of water. This is something drinking this neat. It is a bottle that I could drink neat as a, afternoon drink if I was doing that. I'm not going to say morning because people judge, but I'd say, also in the evening.
Yeah.
So I would give this new product something that it is, you guys have outdone yourself where you had a good product before. And that's not only because you're here, but this is something that if I was doing and if I can get my hands on it, I might actually do that at least on the community page, get the hands on the current one before this weekend, try to go grab one of those bottles when this comes out, grab one of those, and then do the bottle and bond. And it'd be cool to do all three kind of next to each other. I think that'd be a cool exercise, and people might want to try that at home as well. So grab one of the old ones before it is gone forever. I did notice, and I did have a question real quick during this rating time. You had batch number on all your old ones. Now you have bottle number.
Yes.
Is this an effort, because I forgot to ask this before, is this an effort to have more of a consistency going forward, as opposed to, well, I have batch number 93 and this is batch number 96 and they taste quite different because they're small batches, if you will? Is there an effort to have a more consistent product?
So the answer would be yes.
Okay.
There's an effort to have a more consistent product.
Not saying that it was super inconsistent.
No. But if you try batch, 67 versus batch 103,
right,
it's going to be a different experience.
Right.
Batch 101, I mean, that was a really cool one too.
And I remember when you guys were on, you like, because we were doing it remotely.
Yeah.
And you had gifted us a bottle, and you had a bottle, and Greg had a bottle. I think
we had different.
All three of them were different.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. They're all different batches. So
there is, and there was the last so many batches were pretty consistent because they were getting larger.
Yeah.
But when you look at the size of a batch at a small distillery versus an Old Forester or something like that, you're going to have more consistency.
Oh, 100%.
The larger the batches.
Yeah.
But you can get some really interesting complexity when you're doing kind of a small batch curated process.
Right. Okay.
So, but yes, we do expect greater consistency because we're blending more barrels in. And so I think one of you guys said, the percentages, right? Of which we're not releasing it, but part of that is because batch 2 might be slightly different because you're trying to make it as consistent as possible. And we talked about these barrels earlier. They're not necessarily consistent when you start to blend them in and seasonally and
year to year, the grain, all that stuff, everything going into it over time. That's something that, and whiskeys, a lot of spirits. When it goes back to the farming as well, that is where it all starts. And so farmers try to be as consistent as possible, but when it's true, they're not really altering the way their products are coming out, then there is obviously the crop year and all that stuff.
A natural product.
It is.
Yeah.
I would give $39.99 for the regular product. I got to be honest, I'm going to give it a 9. I think this is something that for a $40 product compared to what else is on the market, and this is obviously Ohio prices, which we are a state regulated price, which we saw very much varying when we were down in Kentucky this last several days.
Yeah.
That was disturbing to see.
Oh, gosh.
To see what some things were going for in other states. Absolutely. Saw a guy not even flinch at buying off the shelf a bottle of Blanton's for $199.99. Yeah. So just a quick side note. So 9 on that. I think this is something that you guys are going to be excited to try this. I hope you guys enjoyed as much. I love the fact that one of the things that you guys do with your everyday products like that is you still kind of tweak it a little bit off the normal map of things, which is you throw in that little bit of that the apple brandy barrels. I think that's always kind of cool how you guys are doing it. That 10th anniversary 6-year bottle is gone, right? I mean, it's at your bar maybe, but
so it was released last year for a 10-year anniversary.
Yes.
Batch 2 is being blended.
Batch 2 is being blended. Okay.
As we speak.
But that's exciting. So a lot of cool things going on at Watershed. So I like how this is a little bit different, and you do get it. You do get that. The bottle and bond, definitely I guess a pure bourbon, if you will, because it is. Yeah, I mean,
straight bourbon.
It's just that. I commented when you talked about the heat, Nate. it is a warm whiskey. This is something that maybe it's the higher rye content that you guys do. It's not going to taste like a rye, but it does bring in those characteristics of a warmth, a little bit of the spice. I think I said baking spices. It's something that it has a lot of depth. So again, for $49.99, which I always bring in the price. So Ian's out here calling out our drinking game. Mentioned price, you better have a drink. This is something that I would give it a 9 as well, all things considered. These are two great, if you will, everyday whiskeys. When everything else on the shelves, you got barrel strengths coming out, you got, different stories behind everything. These are two products that you said are going to be readily available is the goal. You should see it on the shelves, whatever state you're in that they are getting distributed to. So they have done things with the greater consistency that you should feel safe buying these bottles. And I hope you guys enjoy them when you try them as much as we have, and especially with a 12 out of 10. But for us, I think a 9 out of 10 for me is absolutely, again, for a $50 for a bottle for me to have every day kind of on my bar. You're no longer in the bargain bottles. You're kind of right in that mid-range. And I think it stands up to a lot of things out there at $49.99. Absolutely. So yeah, 9 on that. The cigar, I'm going to give it an 8, only because I'm not typically a mild smoker. For what it is as well, around that $10 price point, it is, for a lot of people, I think it's going to be pushing that 9 to 10 if they're more of a mild to medium smoker. For me, where I typically enjoy medium to full, I'm going to give it an 8 because it does actually do exactly what I was hoping for. It stands up to, or at least complements everything that we're drinking, but it doesn't get overpowered. And I'm interested to see when we take a sip of these, the ODB, which is what proof?
Oof.
55?
Quiz questions.
57.4.
57.4% alcohol.
Yeah.
Math. 100.
So 104.8, 114.8.
114.8.
So we are not breaching that 100 plus proof. So I'm interested to see how that does it. But this cigar, again, is a tried and true in the Perdomo portfolio. An 8 is not a negative on that. I don't think it's a bad review. I just think it is a great Connecticut everyday type of a smoke. So I hope you guys check that out if you have not had that yet. As I think John Belly, when he was on earlier, he said that, where he's at in New York, they can't keep it on the shelf. It still flies off of all the local shelves here as well. And I know it's one of the top selling SKUs for Perdomo. So that being said, thank you to our sponsors, Tinder Box at Easton, for the Perdomo 10th anniversary champagne. And also thank you to Altadis USA. We've got the Reserva Real on deck and the continued support. And BS Cigar Company, the gold is going to be available very, very shortly if you guys are interested. More medium-bodied all Nicaraguan coming from Plasencia, as well as the silver from La Zona and Espinosa, which is going to be more medium to full, which is something that, of those two, I would pick the gold to do what we were doing tonight, even though it's got a little bit more body, more characteristics that are going to be overpowering sometimes. But the silver would be tough to do a pairing like this with.
Just
because
spice.
There's that pepper and everything, and you don't know what you're getting into with some of the bottles. So that being said, guys, cheers. Happy Whiskey Wednesday. Check out patreon.com/bourbonbs podcast to support us. Share, like, review, all that good stuff. And if you watch it on Facebook or YouTube, I do ask you guys to at least subscribe on Spotify or iTunes, just because if you've already heard it, that's fine. If you missed some of it, it's a good way to share it to people that aren't on Facebook or YouTube, and they don't want to sit down and watch a video. They want to be driving and listen to it. It is available on there post-show about within the next week. So thank you guys very much. We'll see you for part 2.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Sean, what did you think of that old fashioned?
That's really good.
That's smooth, ain't it? Yeah.
So because we use like real granulated sugar, it takes 2 weeks to filter it when they like mix it together, and then they have to filter it out, and it's this whole thing because they don't use like corn syrup. They don't,
Right. So
Right.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, and you said other people add
Cool.
garnishes to it. You already know it all in.
Right.
Like the
right.
cherries.
The cherry.
Yeah.
So if you add, I love Luxardo cherries, but if you add them, I think it might be a little sweet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, okay. So
Do you guys
this,
sell- do you guys sell your bourbon in Indiana?
no, not yet.
not in Indiana.
I have my cousin from South Bend.
Yeah.
Huge bourbon whiskey. And I just texted him. I'm probably gonna go see him.
We need a
Something.
distributor.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
It's on our short list.
Yeah.
It's on the short list.
Yes. We're looking for a friend.
Friend.
This one is like, did you try the
ODB.
ODB?
Mhm.
It's like vanilla
Mhm.
compared to everything we got. So
Yeah.
you get, when you have these blends, you get balance and all the complexity, whatever. And then you get these single barrels and it's like personality shows up.
Very much
And
so.
so,
Which group picked the ODB?
chef.
The chefs.
Yes.
All right.
So this
Which
is
stands for Old Dirty Barrel, not
Yeah,
those of you
not
who are
anything
90s
else.
rapper fans. Like
Bastard. Yeah. There's some naming rights there.
but
Got a
There
little
are
graham
some
cracker
people-
to it.
yeah, some people try this and say, oh, this one's the sweetest. I don't think that at all. I don't think this thing is sweet.
well, let me try the
I think
sugar and
it's like-
spice then, which is that one on
Okay.
the end.
Oh,
I think.
here you
You,
go.
you already threw the ODB?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we go.
You got to like go through and figure out who you want to.
Well, because this is the same order that
Mhm.
we did when we
You're
did the
doing-
tour. We did
yeah.
ODB, sugar and spice, and then King Chambers
Yeah.
because they were going up in proof each one.
But you would never know when you go from sugar and spice to King Chambers.
No, you wouldn't, which
And
is
I-
what was amazing about the King Chambers. So for those still on, sugar and spice, 60.6%. So that's going to be 121.2.
A lady's pick.
So
No.
we go
We're
from
still
one,
live?
so 114.8.
We are still
to
live. This is the intermission right
121.2.
now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
We
this
never
is
stop.
I thought we were.
yeah,
We're not on.
no,
Oh,
this
boy.
is basically like the bonus content for the people that actually
Okay.
listen to us live
Oh.
or go back and watch the video.
Yeah,
Yes.
Todd Conley says Wu Tang is for the kids,
Okay.
old kids.
Yeah, sugar and spice.
I'm not there yet.
Okay. Well, don't feel pressure.
I rarely do.
So this one, to me, is like
Oh,
sweet and creamy.
It's so floral.
Yes.
Yeah, sugar
Yeah.
and spice. On the nose, it's very, very floral.
And like you get those deep notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little deeper
Mhm.
than what the
Got my training wheels on.
bottled
over
and
here,
bond
apparently.
was. Like the bottled and bond and the regular bourbon had a brightness
Yeah.
to the nose. This
Mhm.
one it's like deep dark fruit,
And this was the one the ladies picked.
which
so you know.
included you. Yes.
If you meet the ladies, you'll know why.
I've
Is-
met you.
I know. We
How
were,
many ladies? How many ladies are we talking about here?
so actually,
I know there was another lady doing a tour the same time we were.
she was not there that day.
Okay.
But so it was Jen, and then we had Nikki runs our sales department. Jennifer, I talked about, who's our administration, but she's in every bourbon club there is, and
So I actually know a lady that recently had an interview to work part time at your guys' bottle shop.
how did it go?
Went fine as far as I
Okay.
know. I
Had
wasn't
two
there.
interviews so far, right?
Yes, I wasn't
Alright.
there when the interview happened.
Okay.
But I don't because I know her. I don't think she's going to be someone you're going to tap into when doing barrel picks because
Never know.
with her, if like when she takes a sip of a lot of the bourbons and
Mhm.
stuff, like all she tastes initially is just alcohol. Like it just burns. Like
So that
She just-
exercise, she needs to try the exercise we
That's
just
what-
learned. I don't know if you've ever done this,
Yeah.
and then we do need to get into part two before.
Yeah.
we divulged too much.
No, but it was something that you take, and maybe not with one of these, but you
Mm-hmm.
can, but you take a little bit and you swish it around
Mhm.
in your mouth. That's your first sip. And this is something that I never even thought of. I
Mm-hmm.
know this with like cigars and also whiskey, that your second, third sip or drink is usually going to taste a little different. But this swishing method for those out there, you may want to try this when you first try something, first sip of the day, or if you switch to another bottle. But especially that first drink, you swish it around. And what typically is apparently happening is that it will numb your pain receptors in your on your tongue, in your mouth, your gums, cheeks, everything.
Mhm.
So then you can actually your taste buds will then take over. And that's where that first swishing it around will not kill, but numb your pain receptors. Therefore, it doesn't burn as much afterwards. You guys do that ever? Have you ever heard that?
So I've heard that. Yes. And whatever you taste first is going to be,
Yeah.
kind of revisiting basically is a really good idea.
Okay.
You want unpopular opinion?
Yeah.
I think sometimes when you have barrel proof bourbon and it's really high proof, it anesthetizes your taste buds like to a point where you think it's good and maybe it's not.
That's fair.
It is a way to kind of.
Well, this was even like this. I think we learned that. I learned that. I had not heard it. High proof. This was something that I learned, or we were told at Angel's Envy during the tasting, and this was just their basic Angel's Envy.
Yeah.
The bourbon, right? So they just had us do that with the first sip, switch it around, and kind of worked.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Because it's going to make whatever that first taste is going to be so much better.
And he was also saying that for the judges at a lot of these whiskey competitions, that's what they'll do is they'll do like they don't actually start judging until at least the third sip.
Right.
Because they're trying to get their palate acclimated to it and then really getting into the flavors.
That's a good idea.
All right, let's get started here. Unless you need to take a break?
I'll run. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I will run.
Don't mind the barking dog.
Okay. Where are we going inside?
So just go down the hall. It dead ends. Take a left. First door on the left.
Okay.
If you take a right, that's Tony's room, and he'll. So for those of you guys during this intermission, while Anne is using the facilities, this is very, very cool that Watershed volunteered or agreed to do this, and Anne especially to do this and bring all these on, because this is a very special selection, and it's just really neat to see what they're doing, how it's grown, that they are now doing everything pretty much on site. You know what I mean? Other than on the blended 4-year that they do still source part of that. So it'll be interesting to see if that recipe, if you will, changes over time. But it's really cool to see. They have a great tour. We were very fortunate that Anne kind of got us in.
Yeah.
But again, they're great. I again go back to encourage you guys that are interested in whiskeys. You don't necessarily have to travel down to Kentucky. I encourage that as well. I'm going to do it again because I kind of hit only like 2 or 3 every time I go down there. If you guys can spend a weekend, a week, whatever. But even locally, if you guys are in Columbus or anywhere you're at listening to this, and especially in the United States, hopefully you guys can check your local distilleries around you or the surrounding cities and just go see what they're doing out there. Try some of their stuff, because I know in the past we've talked about it. I've shied away from some of the distilleries that are doing things unconventionally or unconventionally.
Which we've had a few of those products on before.
We have, and you can tell sometimes. So
like
it's cool
the ones doing the smaller barrels or the pressure. Yeah.
So, but yeah, definitely check those things out. Tonight we're going to be talking about, for you guys on the live feed right now, in it for the long haul is going to be the topic. And this is something that driving back from Kentucky, I asked Nate what his thoughts were on topics, and this is something that he suggested, so I'm interested to see what he has to say about it. I gave Anne an entire almost 10 12 hours on the topic to think about in it for the long haul, and so we'll see where we go with that.
In it for the long haul.
In it for the long haul, just like this podcast.
Oh boy.
So we'll get started here. If you guys have any questions, comments, throw them up on the feed here. This is something that Corey's paging Bobby Hirschman. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
You get to drive the conversation, America.
That's right.
And for those wondering why Steve and I took the sound equipment down to Louisville with us, because we had the idea of doing some check-ins at night and stuff. It was just too damn hot and humid down there, even at nighttime. Like the last night we were down there on Monday night, we're sitting on a rooftop balcony that was covered, and the heat index on that balcony was still 99 degrees at 10 o'clock at night. They
had a thermostat, like a digital thermostat, that obviously they were not utilizing anything really, but they had a heater for part of the year, right? But they only had fans going, and that was reading 99 degrees on there. So it was a Cuban themed restaurant. Definitely reminded me. I posted some of the stuff. You guys follow me on social media. Definitely reminded me of my trip down to Cuba, actually, and the heat complemented it. Yeah, the food was really good. I had the pork tamales and smoked a cigar. There's a Patoro, which we don't normally carry here locally, But it was just nice. It was cool to see. It was just fucking hot. All right. You guys ready?
Yep.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Bourbon and BS podcast, everyone. This is episode 175, part 2. We are still joined in the garage by Anne Dimmick from Watershed Distillery. She, as if you guys are watching on the screen, there are more bottles than people on the table here. They have a lot of exciting new products coming out very, very shortly, including some of the regularly available ones that are going to be hitting the shelves starting this weekend in Ohio and the other 7 markets.
Yes.
Yes.
The 8?
You said 8 markets. I
No,
assume
8.
Ohio was one of them.
Yes.
In the 8 markets they're involved in, they're going to be, and we established that New York, because we had John Belly that was in the audience for a while, was asking about New York. We have Ryan Jones, who was on earlier, who's a member of the community as well, asking about Illinois, and that is indeed one of them as well. Florida,
Georgia, Michigan, obviously Ohio,
Yep.
Kentucky. Did we
Kentucky.
say that one?
We did not.
We did not. Kentucky.
All right.
Yeah.
So check that out for sure.
That's right. I saw this on the shelf in Kentucky.
Did you?
Yes.
I saw Watershed on the shelf in Kentucky.
You saw
We're
Watershed.
there.
I saw Watershed.
We're there. We also have some e-commerce partners, and so we keep our website updated. And so if somebody's not in one of our markets that we're in right now, we can help direct you to where you can.
Okay.
You can
Nice.
find our products.
Yeah. Ian Sean Anderson says, I have not seen them in Tennessee. So maybe, is
We're
this
not in Tennessee
watershed.com?
WatershedDistillery.com.
Watersheddistillery.com. So check that out for sure. Find out how you can get some of these bottles.
He'll be here next week.
He will be there next week.
Yeah.
It should be interesting. He's a huge fan, or at least he's on here a lot. I don't know if he's a fan or not, but he's on here a lot. And
I'll have to leave some behind so that he can try.
there you go.
Yeah.
Fantastic. But yeah, so check these out. If you guys haven't listened to part 1, you're listening on the audio, check that out. Looked at the stats recently for whatever reason, part 2, and I think maybe it's how it's hitting. That's, if I post part 1 and part 2, people might click on the latest episode, but the part 2s are getting downloaded more than the part 1s, which was interesting to see. It might be because they want to hear us after we've already had some drinks in us. I don't know. That might be part of it as well. There's a lot of theories out there.
Could be the people that just want to hear something other than bourbon and cigars.
You never know. That's why we do it all. But so thank you to our sponsors, Tinder Box at Easton. We were smoking the Perdomo 10th anniversary champagne, and also Altadis USA. We've got the Reserva Real Romeo Julieta on deck as well. And then BS Cigar Company, the gold and silver. Silver's available now. Gold will be available. We've got some people, Ray Cheshire, Ian, again, they are excited to get the golds back in before, hopefully they'll be in by the time they both are going to be in town. So also patreon.com/bourbonbs podcast. This is a way that you guys can continue to support us and keep it going, keep us streaming live, all that good stuff, and then showing us your support with just a little bit of financial help. You guys are amazing. And then I'd say most importantly, like it, share it, get it out there, because the more people that can hear us, be a part of the conversation like you guys are, if you're listening live, be a part of the Bourbon and BS community page on Facebook. That's what really makes this fun compared to, in my opinion, some of the other podcasts and videos I listen to. Streaming it live is a lot of fun because you guys get involved and really have an impact on where the direction of the conversation goes. Not only in the reviews and talking about the whiskeys, you ask questions for our guests. And now in part 2, we're going to be talking about in it for the long haul is the topic tonight. And I'm interested to see what you all have to say as well. And I'll try to monitor the comments and get your questions and comments up there on the screen as well, and then part of the conversation. So in it for the long haul, one of the things I know, Nate, you had mentioned when you kind of came up with the topic is obviously the 10 years. Now we got the new products out here for Watershed. So it was kind of a good segue into all of this as far in it for the long haul. I looked at it as anytime you're doing it, and we talked about it in part 1 with the actual whiskey side of it, aging tobacco, all of it it's a gamble. You know what I mean? You can't just force it. You know what it's going to taste like. You're going to have a new product out there immediately. And I think that's a lot of times something that, again, in life that happens as well. You think you have everything planned, whether it be a career, whether it be a relationship, and whatever it might be, your health. I'm going to go work out for a weekend and I'll be great. No, you have to actually eat well all the time. You have to be consistent and also tweak it as you go along. So Nate, you brought this up as a topic. Did you have a framework for it?
Well,
other than what I just said?
Well, part of the reason I brought up was thinking about the story of Watershed. because I know we talked about it last year when Anne and Greg were on remote. I know Anne's brought up earlier when she was on today. And so when they first started out, like Anne said, like they still distilled bourbon or whiskey that was going to become bourbon. But they still had to do something to recover some of the cost of doing that. And that's why you see a lot of distillers making gins and vodkas, is because that's something that doesn't have to age in a barrel. And so you can put it out on the market and try and get some of your money back while you're aging whiskey. Whereas some other companies, they start out, I think of New Riff. When New Riff started out, they were OKI.
Correct.
And they were sourcing their whiskey while their stuff was aging. And then once their stuff actually became mature and aged, they started putting that out and changed their name to New Riff.
Which I like that strategy, by the way, on side note, because they didn't try to just keep the same name and keep the same products. And
they did very well.
It was very
well done.
Yeah. That's very
so,
astute.
So when I was thinking about that, that was one of the reasons why I came up with this idea, because Anne was going to be on. So to come up with a bottled and bond, so by law, that has to be aged at least 4 years. Mm-hmm. So that is something that you are taking a gamble on at least 4 years before you're going to be able to recoup any money from that project whatsoever. So when you're coming up with that kind of strategy and that kind of plan, you have to think 4, 5, 6 years or longer down the road. So, or when you came out with the 10th anniversary 6 year, like that was something that you guys had been working on for a long time, and you had to sit on those barrels knowing you couldn't quite sell them yet. You had to have the patience because you saw what the end goal was, and you wanted a product that was special for a 10th anniversary.
And you had to finish in it. You're right. You took a gamble on that too.
You finished it in the in the no cheater barrels. You don't know if
it's going to be good.
That's right.
Absolutely.
It's not always good.
So that's why I came up with that idea, because I thought it would be good having Anne here, because that's what her company's had to do, is they've had to sit there and look at what they want to have available in the future and start making plans for that now, rather than just selling that stuff immediately and not having that available later on. Like you guys could easily just sit there and put out some 2-year whiskeys, but it's not going to be anywhere near any of the bottles that we've sampled so far. It's not going to taste anything like any of the stuff on the table.
There's some great stuff that tastes great young.
There is. But
there's special magic that happens as you start to get a little more aging. But if it's bad in the first place, it's not going to be, you could age it for 20 years and it's not going to be great, so there's a lot that goes
if it sucks,
metaphor for other things in life right there actually.
If it sucks after 2 years, it's probably not going to be great after 4.
You start a job and a couple months into it, you're like, hopefully it gets better. Most likely it won't. Relationships, same way.
You start out, you have that
things are rocky from the start. Yeah, that's probably a sign.
Yeah, that's why they call it the honeymoon phase. Like that first year in relationships, that honeymoon phase, which you just celebrated a 20-year anniversary this week, Anne.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Reading comments here. Patterns are established early. No, I lucked out because we got married when I think I was 23 and he was almost 30. And when I think back to like 23-year-olds, like what do they know? And I always say, I just lucked out. I did.
That's a good way to look at it.
I wasn't smart at the time, but I picked well. So
yeah.
I did.
That's good. Yeah, 2 23-year-olds in at the same time is even
that might not work so well. So well.
I'll raise you a 19 and 18-year-old. That didn't work out well for my parents.
And here we are.
It's it.
Although there's Ian Anderson says, hey, in relationships, it's better to get the rocky out early. Everyone's got a different perspective. Let me say, I'm not going to say there aren't good stories that if like your first date was kind of a nightmare, but you gave it a second date and all of a sudden it was great. That's fine. First 6 months are rocky.
Cut your losses.
Yeah, not spend any more
Not
time.
going.
Yeah, exactly.
This is
Exactly.
not good.
We had a comment I threw up there. Corey says, always found it funny. Oh, no, that's not the one. Hang on one. He had this one. Patience, battling time. The only thing in life that's irreplaceable. Knowing, risking, pivoting, and committing. Knowing time is against you. The long haul. That's an interesting attitude with that, I think, is that, you know, again, like you said, Anne, like with whiskey and stuff, if it's not good in the beginning, if it's not good juice, like, it's going to take a fucking miracle to make it a good product when you finally do it.
Right.
Or good marketing.
Some people get away with that.
A lot of companies get away with that. Absolutely. If you can make things exclusive, if you can make it pretty on the bottle or whatever packaging the industry is, and make it seem like that, everyone agrees upon that it is a good, tough to find product. Whiskey world is definitely a part of that, in my opinion. I'm not gonna don't say any names.
No, it wasn't. I was gonna say, like, using terms like small batch, like that was a term that all of a sudden, you know, elevated whiskey a little bit into popularity after it had been died off for a little bit. Like small batch.
Create your own buzz.
What's the definition of small batch? Like, I don't think there's a uniform definition. Like there's
smaller than your large batch.
Yeah. Well, we found when we were in Louisville, I mean, there were some places that they blend 8 barrels in a batch. There are some places that do 50 barrels in a batch. There are some places that do 150 barrels in a batch, and they still call them small batch.
Yeah, it's all relative.
Yeah.
All right, so with this, in it for the long haul, I think there's pros and cons to it, right? I mean, it's something that if you commit, like that old-fashioned thing where we look at, like, say, my parents' generation. You know, my mom's 74, my dad would have been 77, and you know, they weren't necessarily that traditional. I'm with the same company for my entire career. You know, you hear that, and some people still do it now, but it's like I got hired on at this factory, and I'm going to retire from here because it's a good job. And you go through the ups and downs. You're miserable a lot of the times, whatever it is, but you're in it for the long haul. That doesn't exist as much anymore. You look at now, even same thing with relationships, I feel like friendships, but even like, you know, romantic relationship, marriages. There was a time in the previous generation or the one before that, especially, I don't want to say everyone was always 100% loyal, because obviously we all know that's not the case. Plenty of movies and TV shows and history about that. I mean, you look at history books and stuff like that, you know, back in the 1800s, there was a lot of things going on there with some prominent historical figures. But I'm just going to say they stuck with the marriage. They stuck with it, where today, you know, me being divorced, I'm not going to say it was just like I walked away from it just without any, like, there was 2 years of marriage counseling. We tried, you know, one of those things, and I'm still friends with my ex-wife today. But there are things that I don't want to say we're in it, just, I don't want to necessarily make it oversimplified, but it's like this disposable world today, that instant gratification world that we're in today, whether it be career, romantic relationship, personal relationships. People walk away or drop things so quickly without even thinking twice about it, or maybe they think twice about it, but they're like, you know what, it's too much stress, I'm going to go try to do the next thing, without learning from it, without putting a little bit of that. I feel like there has to be some sort of a self-worth, and you know, you can't just be in it for the long haul when it comes to your job. You don't think you're getting paid well enough, you're not getting treated well enough, the benefits aren't there, but you still have a job and it's stable. That shouldn't be necessarily enough for, I think, most people. Same thing with a relationship. Go to the extremes in a sense. You know, when I used to study all this stuff back, you know, in sociology and everything else, and then before that, it was like you look at even the social psychology courses I took, you know, domestic violence relationships, things like that. People a lot of the time stay in them because they're afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of being alone, or it could be worse. So they stay in it for the long haul. These are some of the negatives about it. So I'm interested in what you guys think out there in the audience. I feel like, you know, you guys, Ann and Nate, what you guys think. What are your pros and cons of staying in it for the long haul, whether it be career, personal relationships, like friendships, romantic relationships, any of that stuff? I mean, it's kind of like one of those things. Like if you know you have bad juice, or if you think you might, what's the balance? What's the attitude? What are we trying to do to grow as you evolve and get older?
That was a lot. Deep.
I'll play it
Yeah.
back here. I can't do that. It's live.
No. Oh gosh. Well, so I'll go one direction.
All right.
I think when it comes to relationships, patterns are established early. So
Okay.
there might be one bad date, but 6 months, like
Yeah.
that's not gonna get better.
Every time you go out to dinner, you're just
Right.
like kind of like, I'm sitting at a table with her.
Right.
It's not serious. Sorry.
Right.
Like you're embarrassed a little bit. Like that's not a good feeling.
Yeah. And I think that there was probably more pressure to stay together, even if it was just a really bad fit in previous generations. And
it's a
so,
survival part too, right?
Yeah.
Like you had gender roles, if you will. You know, it's like, it's you had a provider typically, and you had to stay at home. And traditionally, obviously, and obviously that's changed a lot, not just recently, but in the previous decades, is that you had the male that was the provider, hunters and gatherers, right? Everyone had their role. So it's like you kind of were a team. And even if you didn't get along, you still survived.
Yeah. And I think people have a lot higher expectations of marriage today than they did, and like what they would get from it and all of that. So I don't know. But I think back to, I have a friend. He actually manages Patron for several, Nick's great.
All right.
And we were talking right before he got married, and he said something I always go back to. And somebody was giving him advice going into the marriage, like, oh, make sure you keep this separate and this and this and this. And he was like, we just sat down, we looked at everything, and we just decided all in. Everything's on the table.
Yeah.
And I was like, I love that. So I think, like, if you're going to be in it for the long haul, it's got to be all in.
There's a true commitment.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because if you do that, obviously, if you're in it for the long haul, the outside factors are still going to have a play, but you've committed to do all. Hopefully, the goal is to communicate, to go through the ups and downs. When someone goes through a struggle, whether it be a job loss or a we do this, right? So that's like the whiskey and drinking and some of like substance abuse and mental illness is such a prevalent thing in this world today. I think it has been. It's just more prevalent as far as being talked about and studied and everything else after the pandemic that we just came out of. Obviously, these are the trickling stories that are coming out of it. If you have that attitude, like you're saying, of being all in, then part of it is on your part. And that's the big part. You have to control your part. If you've got an issue with yourself, with the other person, if you're in a job, you should be able to kind of explain your perspective to your boss or employer, hoping that it's a conversation. There's no ego necessarily. Take that out of it, right? So there's an agreement there to a point. Jobs and careers are different than personal relationships. With the marriage, like you're talking about, if the other party or if you are not doing your 50%, then that's where the all-in starts struggling, right? Because one half or whatever can give their 100%, which is the 50, and they're still all in, but the other part starts pulling back. That's breach of contract. That's breach of contract right there.
That kind of sounds like the toast I made at Dustin's bachelor party when we were at Watershed.
Yeah.
Someone in the group came up with the ingenious idea that after we've done 2 distillery tours and drank however much whiskey, that we should go around the table and
that wasn't me. Was that me?
No, it wasn't you.
I think I bought the round.
You bought the no. Yeah, you bought the round at Watershed.
I was there.
But it was
mostly.
Someone came up with the idea, everyone go around the table and give
right.
Dustin a piece of advice.
That's right.
And so when it came to me, I had said, like, it's not 50-50. It's got to be 100-100.
Right. It's a good perspective.
You have to give everything to this relationship. Otherwise, it may not work out. I'm not going to say it's a guarantee it's not going to work out. But you have a better chance of it working out if both parties are giving 100% to the relationship.
Yeah.
It's like the same thing with, say oxen pulling a cart or horses pulling a carriage. Like if one wants to slack off, like they're not going to get to where they need to go, or if one starts pulling another direction, like it's not going to get to where it wants to go.
It's a good metaphor.
And it actually makes me think of Belgian draft horses specifically. So
Explain for anyone out there, you know, not at
a
this
draft
table,
horse,
but
a draft horse. So about the size
if anyone out there doesn't know what a
The commercial,
Belgian,
the Budweiser commercial,
those
right?
are Clydesdales.
Okay,
So
whatever.
a draft horse is actually
Yeah.
going to be that size or even bigger.
Okay.
Okay, but
Yeah.
yes, you know, the bigger horse breeds.
Mhm.
So one draft horse by itself can pull 8,000 pounds.
Mhm.
So if you get two of them that have never worked together, you sit there and think, okay, well, two of them not worked together before, pull 16,000 pounds. No, they can pull 24,000 pounds. If they work together for 6 months, those two horses will pull 32,000 pounds. So
Right.
even though they can only pull 8,000 pounds individually, you put them together and they've worked together before, they'll double their combined pulling weight.
and what's your response to this metaphor? I have mine.
You took Dave Ramsey.
That's-
No, that's not Dave Ramsey. Oh,
I've taken Dave Ramsey.
Oh my gosh!
but
Yeah, that is like my favorite.
My wife owns a horse,
Oh. Okay.
So you combine those.
If you do the Dave Ramsey class, they talk about the
I used to
importance of
teach that.
working. So did we. They talk about the importance of actually working together.
Yeah.
And they give that example. And that's so true. If you're pulling in two different directions, you're not going to go anywhere.
I'm going to try the King Chambers right now, by the way.
Yes.
Oh.
Oh.
What did you think about? Did you try sugar
more
and spice?
More spice than sugar.
Oh.
See, but I will say I like
But I do like it. No, I think it's really good.
sugar and spice.
See, for me,
more-
I think this is sweet.
I like sugar and spice more
More
than
sugar?
Less spice. No, it's more spice.
That's it's
Deep spice. Yeah.
I like sugar and spice more than ODB. Like hands down.
it's really difficult to, and we're going back to whiskey, everyone.
Yeah.
Here. So if you weren't part of part one, so we have the three single barrels that
And this is the
team
one
at
I have a bottle
Watershed,
of. I
they
bought a
picked-
bottle of the King Chambers.
I remember.
Oh, you remember that?
I actually do.
Oh.
It was
It's really good.
it was hit or miss. It was in and out for a little while there. But it was a good time. So yeah, no, we're actually, so this King Chambers, that's the thing is that better or worse, it's so unique. That's where it's tough to compare. Like when I was doing the comparison, for example, side note,
Mhm.
with the
quite the
bottled and
suicide out
bond.
there.
Yeah, that's
That's whatever's in that glass is dangerous.
Guys, we're doing a bourbon dinner tomorrow. I gotta keep it good.
yeah. And then you're gonna have to figure out what that mixture is because you have to take a sip of that and see what's
Oh,
good.
yeah.
No, we
No, but I was-
saved this for Sean, Ian Sean Anderson.
Infinity
when he
bottle
comes
right
by.
there. That's infinity glass.
That's right.
No, but I'm saying comparing the two,
Mhm.
like bottle and bond and the 4-year, rate it individually the best you can.
Mhm. Mhm.
You guys run a competition. No, it's interesting because with that example you gave with the Belgian
Draft
majestic horses.
That's right.
No, it's the longer you work together, right? The stronger you can get, the more workload you can handle. Not saying you're not going to run into some problems and all that good stuff, but you should be stronger together. But you have to work together. And I will say this with that metaphor, which you probably didn't mean, but you have someone training those horses too, right?
Yes.
So you have to have good examples, in my opinion, when you're dealing with this.
Mhm.
And if for the long run, having a mentor in life and career.
Mhm.
We've had people on. They've used different terms. We've referred to it several times. Board of directors
That's a drink.
from Josh Bentley. I know, but it's actually really relevant right now. But you can have mentors, and sometimes they change throughout life, where you're at in life, what you're dealing with, whether it be career issues, relationship issues. Sometimes you have to hire them. Have a life coach. That's a new thing, in my opinion, in the recent years. There are people that are their title. We had Grant was on a couple years back, and he's a life coach, and there are life coaches. Action coaches for business. I did that in my previous life in business, where I worked with an action coach, and they really look at that you pay them to basically be a psychologist or whatever you want to say as a therapist for whatever arena you're trying to improve on. And sometimes you do have to go out there and go see a therapist. If you're in a struggling marriage or relationship, there are counselors for that. If you're struggling with some of these things, there's like substance abuse or depression. It's not just always in a Western medicine pill bottle that they just, here's pharmaceutical, boom, take this, you'll be fine. Sometimes you have to learn from people that have been through it. Mentors are great because typically you find someone in your life that either has a successful career. And I know we've talked about this on the podcast, that what your snapshot is of that person, whether it be financial, career-wise, marriage, health, fitness, nutrition, whatever it might be, mental health, they're always in a good mood. Your snapshot or your perspective of that individual, if they're someone that you might say, hey, I want to learn from you and how you're like this now, be prepared to hear about a lot of struggles and ups and downs with that. And that's where the trainer, like those two horses you're talking about, they don't just always naturally work well together.
Very true. Right?
You have to get like a third party sometimes to help them stay on the same page.
Because they may have different personalities. So.
They may have different personalities. They may butt heads, whatever it might be. But sometimes you can work well together if it at first, and that's where we go back to, if it's rocky at first, that's all based on what you guys want to do. But I think that if there's a natural fit in a career, a personal romantic relationship, a friendship, if it becomes, I always said this, if it becomes in a relationship, again, career, otherwise romantic, if it starts becoming more negative than positive, if that ratio starts really skewing towards the negative, that's unfortunately a lot of times too late. But if you start feeling that there's more negative than there are benefits to that of your life, then now that's where the self-worth has to come in. And that's where you really have to figure out, am I giving that 100% that you're talking about, Nate? Am I in it for the long haul? There's self-diagnosis there, right? Looking in the mirror, all that stuff. Career-wise as well. Am I fucking up? Am I showing up on time? Am I giving it my all, giving it my whatever the agreed upon is, and all they're asking for is more and it's not good enough? That's a problem in your career. That employer may not appreciate you.
I've had that, yeah.
I think we all have.
Yeah.
I think we all have. We all had personal relationships same way. There's a lot of times too that I will say with this, in it for the long haul, that you also, if you ask those honest questions with yourself, you're like, no, I am fucking up a little bit. I'm not giving it my 100%. So now all of a sudden you have to tweak what you're doing. Put more effort in while you're at work. Don't take as many breaks. Don't sit there on your phone, on Facebook, or whatever it might be. In personal relationship, if they're talking to you, put your fucking phone down. That type of thing. That's friendships. That's acquaintances. And that's also romantic relationships. So it's, again, you have to really kind of pick yourself apart sometimes. And sometimes you ask your second party, your employer, your significant other, your friend, whatever it might be, you ask them. You have to start having those conversations. And it's not comfortable. It's not comfortable for everyone. I will say that.
Well, I think another aspect of that is if there is a rocky road, if there's a problem in that relationship, whether it be personal relationship, romantic relationship, business, your career, whatever, when you have that trouble, say trouble waters, rough seas coming, like you don't just quit at the first sign of problems, but you have to recognize that there is one. So like if you're in a relationship and things aren't going well in that relationship, the first step is figuring out why. Like, what's the problem? Why are we having this problem? Then we can actually figure out how we actually solve and overcome and get past this problem. And some problems in a relationship are easier to deal with than others.
Absolutely.
Some problems are just figuring out, finances, what we're going to spend money on. Other problems, that could go that can go drastic. But I mean, I know,
like what?
Well, I mean, infidelity, I mean, that's that's pretty often a killer in a relationship.
So that's a tough obstacle.
That's a tough obstacle to get past. But I mean, I know I've known people that wasn't an obstacle that happened in their marriage. There were other obstacles, such as, both parties like to drink, and when they like to drink, they like to fight. Now, they were good enough not to fight in front of the kids, but they like to fight. And, that was just something that together they were not able to overcome. And that relationship split, but then they were actually able to overcome those problems individually.
Well, there you go.
And eventually, actually, both of those people ended up getting remarried and, happily married ever since.
Learning from it, right?
Yeah.
Patterns.
Patterns. That's
Patterns.
Ray Chester says, giving your all is not the same as being in it for the long haul. You need to recognize opportunity for change too. That's always important.
Agree.
And we can, Anne says agreed. It doesn't always have to be something, again, we don't have to, there's not always two parties, right? I always bring up too, and is taking care of yourself, right? Is getting enough sleep, making sure that you're healthy. And part of that is going to the doctor, making sure that your blood levels are checked, making sure you're doing that on a regular basis, because those types of health issues can also bleed into your other aspects of life, right? So if you're not healthy, if you don't have a good base, if you're not taking care of yourself, there's a lot of things that kind of bleed into those relationships, your work life, your romantic life, your home life. If you're, you talked about, drinking and then fighting. I mean, that's one of those things. If you're not taking care of yourself, right? If you don't, what's that?
No, go ahead.
You can't whisper when there's a microphone ahead of you.
I missed it. I don't know.
What, Nate?
That was my parents.
Oh, so you have firsthand experience with that. So that's part of it is that, and sometimes that's that toxic behavior. If you are involved with someone, or again, a work environment that is just toxic and it just fuels all that behavior. But there are those times where, again, like, if you are tired all the time, if you're not feeling healthy and all you do is continue down the path, that's not necessarily the in it for the long haul type of a thing. It's like, I'm in it for the long haul. I'm going to eat a bag of chips every night because I've done it for the last 2 years and I feel like shit. So I'm going to eat a bag of chips every night. I'm going to drink half a bottle of whiskey. I'm going to not exercise. I'm not going to do these things. I'm not going to take vitamins. I'm not going to go to the doctor because I'm stubborn. And I think that's a big part of this, is that the in it for the long haul can sometimes introduce a level of stubbornness in people when it's just their part of it, whether it's a part of a relationship or a career or your health and everything else. Sometimes there's a level of stubbornness that better, or I know everything I need to know about this. As soon as you shut that off, you stop learning, you stop growing, you stop evolving. And that is something that I want to make sure that when we talk about in it for the long haul, that's something that can creep into that.
Mm-hmm.
I was taking it a little bit different way. So I was in my car on the phone when I first pulled up, and I was talking to a mentor of mine, and he used to run a global whiskey portfolio and felt very uplifted afterwards. He's ex-military, and he said something like, well, the important thing is every day do your best. And if you have enough of those days in the row where you did your best, you'll wake up 20 years later and you might be Tito's, like Tito's vodka. We're laughing, but and be an overnight success. Ha ha. Because an overnight success generally isn't. And it's a culmination of just lots of good decisions, one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
So in it for the long haul, I do think from a positive standpoint,
Yeah, I think the positive standpoint, I mean, you're right.
Making the right decisions. And sometimes the right decision might be to do the right thing and cut off something that's not
toxic,
the healthiest.
Yeah, the toxic part of it, right? Yeah. As hard as it can be, yeah.
I think
Mhm.
sometimes that's easiest for us in say not relationships, in careers. Like I think there are some people that, and it's more prevalent with older generations than it is younger generations right now. Because older generations, like you alluded to earlier, Steve, they get that job at a factory and they work at that factory for 30, 40 years and then they retire. But then you have people nowadays, in their 20s or 30s that by the time they're 40, they'll have 10 or 12 different jobs.
But the older generation had defined benefit retirement plans.
They did. They had pensions and stuff like that.
Does anybody our age, do we know anybody who has a defined benefit retirement plan? I don't think so.
My company does. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, our company.
If you
has,
stay with
We'll
them,
talk afterwards.
yeah.
if you stay with them, yeah.
No,
But-
but I mean that
It's something I've gone through.
know.
It's something I've gone through and still going through in my professional career. Is it's a place I'm comfortable at, but not always happy at. And so sometimes that does, sometimes there could be something that happens at work where I'm like, you know what? That just rubs me the wrong way. I want to try to find something else. I want to go see what else is out there and, put my resume out there and try and interview elsewhere and maybe get at a place that pays a little bit more, maybe appreciates me a little bit more.
Mhm.
And then if none of those fall through, then it's like, well, all right. Then I have this, 4 or 5 month stint where I'm just like, well, I'm just happy to be here where I'm at and just suck it up and deal with it.
I think that's something to do with the grass isn't always greener type thing. And that mentality that you were saying, you have to identify what's wrong. And that's where you have to be able to communicate with your employer in that situation. You know what I mean? And to Anne's point, and there's people out there, I agree completely. It's absolutely doing the right thing, right? So if your knee-jerk reaction, if someone upsets you at work or in life in general, and your next thing is like, fuck this, I'm out.
I'm talking about something much more significant than that, but I get what you're saying.
What are you talking about?
Just go ahead and finish.
Okay.
give us the deal.
Yeah. Anne says she's the guest. What are you talking about?
No.
You brought it up.
I mean, so
If you don't want to say it, that's fine.
I mean, so I've had several opportunities within the company that I've been passed up for, that I thought because of my experience and knowledge and my time with the company, I don't want to say I felt entitled. I don't want to say that because I don't. But I felt like, I deserved that opportunity a little bit more than someone from the outside coming in.
Yeah.
There was one job in particular that I had applied for, and the manager of that position, when we were in the office, he sits 2 desks away from me, and he actually talked to me. He's like, yeah, with as long as you've been here, knowing what like I definitely want to interview you for this position. And then about 3 weeks later, he messages me. He's like, hey, I want to let you know we hired someone for this position. I was like, I didn't even get a chance to interview you. Like, you said you were going to interview me. And he goes, yeah, we saw this one person's resume and we talked to them and that was it. And we hired them. That was all we did. We saw this person's resume, hired them. I'm like, so like as these opportunities have come up and I've been passed up for them, and for different reasons, I've been passed up for them. All of a sudden I start to think I'm like, maybe I would have a better opportunity to grow in my professional career if I was someplace I didn't have a quote unquote reputation.
Well, you're always going to create a reputation. I think, just go ahead.
I was going to say, sometimes there's a little bit of, you can't be a prophet in your own land. Like I think about it with parenting, basically, because we have a going to college in the fall, and people will be like, your mom, she's, and he's like, my mom, she's,
Conflicting
Right. Conflicting
Perspectives.
stories,
Uh-huh.
that sort
Yeah.
of thing. And so sometimes I think that it can be even harder, like in an organization where they saw you kind of come up and grow up. They're like, oh, yeah, that's just, whatever. And sometimes that can hurt.
Well, the good thing at least is I have at least explained to my manager and even his boss, because both of them, like they knew that I was wanting to grow out of the position that I'm in, and that I was applying and interviewing for multiple positions internally. But I also told them that I was looking for opportunities externally, and they were like,
how'd that go?
So
Tell us more.
So my manager's manager, who's actually like the VP of our entire product line, has actually said, like, if you're gonna go like interview for places, like let us know, like prepare us in case we need to replace you because of the value that I have in the company. Like they don't want to lose me.
Yeah.
But they also know that like if someone else offers me a better opportunity, like I might jump ship and take it. But yet on the flip side of that, they want to keep me, but they don't necessarily want to offer me what it might take to keep me.
So Steve.
But then there are times I sit there and I'm like, well, based on what's happening in my career there, like, do you deserve a heads up? Like if
right.
2 weeks notice is one thing.
We're gonna give you a little career advice right here.
Like,
advice.
But like if I go out and interview for another position and they offer it to me, like, hey, here's my 2 weeks. Like, oh shit, we didn't know you were that serious. I'm like, you should have.
So there's in businesses. So let's get away from the personal relationships. With business, that's one thing that you should be able to. Obviously, you want to take care of your home life and everything else financially. So there is a stability side of it that bills have to get paid. So there is something there. There is a very classic thing I've seen happen several times, and I've even been a part of it before, where as soon as you say, hey, I'm putting my 2 weeks in, and like, well, what do they offer you? And now all of a sudden they're offering you a raise, they're trying to match it and all that stuff. And you're like, too little, too late type thing. Like I will have a parallel there with a personal relationship, right? It's like when someone is maybe trying to, that goes back to you have to give 100% on both sides, right? So that like employer, employee, you need to do that. And to Anne's point earlier, it's and to your mentor's point, you wake up, you do your best every day. And as long as you feel like you're doing that, the irony of what you're dealing with, Nate, in that sense is if someone gets hired on it, we have another friend of ours here in town, and I'm not going to mention any names, but they got their position got downsized during the end of the pandemic, if you will, back in October, lost his position. And he's been applying for positions. He will then do a little bit of like LinkedIn stalking when he finds out who got the positions, if he can, right? It's because they update their LinkedIn. And he looks at their experience and he's like, yeah, I'd probably hire them over me too. And he's very qualified, and and he's experienced in his career. He's not a young person, but he looks at it, he's like, yeah, that actually makes more sense based on what I can see they've done before. So, and you might be getting passed up from outside candidates. Is that what I'm hearing, Nate?
More internally than externally.
And that's rough. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that as long as you're giving your all and you're communicating with your employer or whatever, there will be a time where you have to leave that relationship, in air quotes, is because you don't have the opportunity to expand. So now, not necessarily, you at least want to do a lateral move, maybe to another company, but hopefully there is an opportunity to then bring that experience that you have. And you said profit in your own land. Is that what you said?
You can't be a prophet in your own land.
Right. So you take this, you're the new person with this experience, and you may be able to translate your experience to a new opportunity. Not saying leave your job, but it's one of those things like in a relationship, like you're talking about, that is the same thing as a personal relationship. As soon as that person's like, I've had enough, I'm leaving, like, no, I can change. That's an employer in a lot of instances. Is that it's like, oh, you're really going to leave? I liked it the way we had it, and now you're leaving. here's more money. Oh no, we have more opportunities coming up. I can almost guarantee you're going to get
say
it.
whatever I need to say right now
Absolutely.
to end the pain I'm in right at this moment.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, the first time I made a significant career change, like I completely jumped ship. It was in a completely different industry.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like I was going to the competition or doing a similar job or in a similar field. It was, I'm completely leaving this industry and I'm going to go do something else. And they were, that employer in particular was asking me about it. And I'm like, yeah, you can't pay me what they're offering. Cause I mean, let's face it, in our life, that's a big impact is financial stability, money.
It's a big part of the equation.
You know, my employer at that time, they basically would have had to have doubled my pay in order to match what this company was going to be paying me.
Yeah.
But the one thing that they couldn't account for is how I felt about the job.
Okay.
They couldn't pay me enough to be as happy as I was going to be doing that new job. I know at one point, this was a few years ago with a previous manager and a previous, even their boss higher up. So my position, we have a team in Columbus and we have a team in Chicago. We're all on the same team. We all do the same job, but we have two different offices. And they had asked me, like, what would it take for you to move to our Chicago office? And I was like, way more than you're willing to pay. And they're like, how much more? And I threw out a number and they're like, what the, like, where's that coming from? I'm like, one, cost of living out in Chicago is a lot higher than it is in Columbus, but also from a personal side, there's a lot of things that I get to do in Ohio and enjoy that I cannot do in Illinois. And like, you're going to have to pay me in order for me to give up any of those opportunities and extracurriculars that I enjoy. Like, I think the number I actually threw out was actually 4 times more than what they were paying me now.
Might be a little extreme, yeah.
I'm like, that's what it would cost for me to move to Chicago.
You went higher.
And it's basically like, no, you can't pay me enough to do this job and move to Chicago.
All right. And any comments on that? But what does it, in it for the long haul mean to you?
Oh gosh. Well, I think we talked about relationships quite a bit, and then we kind of trended into careers. And I think about being at Watershed because there's so many.
You've been there how long?
I have been there not the long haul. So it's only been a little over a year and a half.
Yeah.
But in the liquor industry since 2009. So that's like kind of the long haul, that sort of thing.
Decade plus.
Right. But it's interesting having worked for really large companies and then like the largest of the small companies being Campari, and then being at a true small business that's local. And you see these distilleries where people made money in some other area and then they came in and they, there's money to blow basically. Yeah. And we're very much still a small local business. And the stories from the early years, basically it was just keeping the lights on because people are like, so what's the oldest barrel in the warehouse? And I'm like, 7+ years, because in the beginning they had to sell it to keep things going. I mean, it was we're in our original location, but it was in a very small footprint. So it's been, I think when I started, there were less than 20 people on the distillery side. And today we have a little over 30, somewhere in there. And then we have the restaurant and everything. So it's definitely growing, but you'll still see Greg there every day wearing jeans and a t-shirt. And it's kind of the do the right thing, come in, do the right thing. And so it's kind of amazing to see, but that it doesn't happen overnight. No. But you can go there and be like, wow, this is so cool. But that didn't happen, the first year.
No.
Yeah.
Well, anyone that gets into business, right? I mean, it's like typically it was 5 years, they say, like you hope to make money at some point, you hope to pay yourself so you can survive to get to that point. but I think it's a steady growth. And that's a lot of times we've talked about on this podcast, where anything in life, but business especially, you have that SWOT analysis. And sometimes one of the biggest threats from the outside for you guys with these new products, for example, it gets too popular too fast. And then now you have the ethical side of it where you're like, do we just change it and tweak it and force it? And so we just put it out there and put the same label on it?
Right.
No, because you're gonna sacrifice the integrity of it. So it's the healthy growth.
Yeah.
When you talk about in it for the long haul, that is something that I think you have to introduce to the conversation, is that you have to do things. And it's great that you were talking to your mentor about that, and you know, do the right thing for 20 years. And all of a sudden you're an overnight success 20 years later.
Yeah.
Because no one knew who the fuck you were 15 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. Now all of a sudden it's like, that's an everyday name. Like, man, they just popped up out of nowhere. And it's like, you got to read their book, you know, because it's one of those things that the healthy, steady growth is something that is very important, because if you grow too fast, too quickly, you're going to have to sacrifice, and all of a sudden the wheels are going to start falling off.
Right.
You're not built to go that fast. And I think that goes with your career. If you get promoted, and you didn't spend enough time, I'm not saying your example, Nate, I'm not specifically talking about that. I'm just saying, like, if you get those promotions and all of a sudden you're punching above your weight class at that point, you know, because it's like, oh, you're the best candidate and you have this attitude and like it's all great and everything seems to work, and all of a sudden you like sit down at your desk or whatever your position is, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
The problem with that, I think of it like if you're building a skyscraper too fast, you don't have a solid enough foundation.
That's the key.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
You don't have the foundation that can actually support all the weight and responsibility that comes with this higher position.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it can be the same thing in a relationship. I know, I think it was my mom that commented earlier, like having a good foundation and being similar and having common interests, like all the stuff that, you know, I think of it like you have the primary things that you agree on. You know, secondary things you can kind of disagree on some here and there, tertiary and so forth and so forth. Like you can have a little bit more disagreements on, but as long as you have a big, wide base that is solid foundation, you can build anything on top of it. Just about.
And I keep going back, take a step back. You need to know, and then this is different for everyone, and career or personal or health wise, is you have to start. If you're talking about the foundation for a relationship or a career, you need to find your own home base first. You know, you need to know yourself. You need to keep learning about yourself, because if you don't, I've learned that. I've learned it, forgotten it. I've learned it again. I'm not going to say how many times, but it's one of those things that, you know, it's like the more you know yourself and what you want out of life in general, relationships, career, all that stuff. And you're going to keep learning that. And I think that was something that was said in the comments. You know, it's like there's the only consistency is, and this was not in the comments, the only consistency really is the effort and the openness, I think, to continue to learn about yourself. So therefore, then you can make sure that you are able to put the 100% in, and you have that foundation, because you're a part of that. You're actually one of the main ingredients in that. And if you don't know what you want out of it, like that skyscraper, you don't have it's not even
you don't even have a blueprint.
You don't even have a shared vision. You're just going along with the other person says. You're like, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah. That's yeah. You want to do that? Yeah. You want to build a skyscraper? You want to get married? Cool. Yeah. Sounds good. But you don't know what you fucking want, then all of a sudden it's not going to work, because the foundation is already built on sand at that point. You know what I mean?
It also makes me think of the story of the Tower of Babel. Like they wanted to build a tower to reach all the way to heaven. So what did God do? You're all going to speak different languages. There was no communication. They couldn't all figure out.
Messed up, man.
They couldn't all figure out how to get to the same point, and so it just didn't happen. It failed because there was no communication. There was no commonality. They couldn't agree on what they wanted because they couldn't communicate with each other.
the Old Testament could not be shown on network TV.
No, the Old Testament.
Not
could
on network TV.
Netflix, though.
Yes.
I have
Hulu,
There we go.
FX.
I've
Yes.
always said if they made a movie actually about the Bible, it would be
It would be bad.
It would be an NC-17 film. Like you couldn't make it. It wouldn't even be
Like
R.
if you really made it.
Oh yeah.
If you made it for real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Couldn't do that. Couldn't do that at all.
Me.
Hmm.
A lot of true crime documentaries out there. I mean, I feel like you probably could at this point.
There are. I was watching so years ago when we had a
course.
very young child, there was a
I'll take a sip of
cartoon
one,
or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Do the bottle and bond here.
Oh, here you go.
May I?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, there was a
Talk about your true
it
crime.
was, no, it wasn't true crime. It was like a Bible cartoon, and they were really bringing things like down to the level everybody could understand it until they got to the part about a woman who was actually a prostitute.
Right.
And they in the cartoon they're like, she was a woman of ill repute. This was in a
Ill
children's
repute.
cartoon.
What year was this?
Oh, this is years ago.
All right, that's fair.
I mean,
Yeah, I didn't wanna-
he's going to college, so this was years ago, and it was probably old then.
yeah.
But
night.
oh, but we digress.
What are we digressing to?
I don't know.
Bobby Hirschman says, "Drink water, Steve." I'm on it, man.
What are we doing?
Yeah.
In fact, I was behind these two. I'm in it for the
Wow.
long haul, there, Bobby.
He's in it for the long haul.
Well, Steve, yesterday in the car ride back when you and I were talking about this, I was waiting for you to bring up the hand in the face.
Oof.
You haven't used that in a while.
So yeah, go ahead.
But no, I was thinking about that. Like, if you're only seeing short sighted, like you're only seeing your hand, you're not seeing like what's beyond it. Like you got to move the vision further back in order to be able to see the whole picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ann's drinking more water here.
Drinking water.
We got a conflict out there. Bobby Hirschman says, "Drink water, Steve," and Greg Sanson says, "More bourbon." You know, depends on what kind of show you guys want to see here.
Closing remarks going to be lit.
No, the hand in the face thing, right? So for those that aren't familiar with this is something that I introduced a long time ago, and I don't even know where I heard it. I don't know if I did hear it. I really can't recall at this point. It's going back to like episodes.
The first year of the podcast.
Yeah, first 6 months of the podcast. And I think that in it for the long haul is also about the clarity, right? That's the balance. We talk about those things, but do you know the hand in the face metaphor?
Mm-mm.
So when you're dealing with something, and this is even with this, in it for the long haul, relationships, career, everything like that, if you are so concerned about today, not in the positive way that you're saying, Anne, about, you know, that's a positive, but I think that the balance aspect of it is that when you have the issues that you're dealing with, whether it be, you know, the negatives, right? So all you have is a hand in the face, and you're trying to focus on that hand. When you do that, it's tough because, you know, especially as you get older, it's tougher because nearsighted or farsighted, but you can't see things as close. Anyways, you focus on that, and then you try to look beyond that, and everything's out of focus. So the biggest thing about that is that when you're dealing with things, no matter what the arena is that you have to not only look in the mirror and everything like that, but even with your hand, if that is in your face, you can't see clearly in the mirror. So as you bring the hand away from your face, now everything naturally is easily adjusted. Your focus level, you can see the hand, you can see the beyond the hand, and all that stuff. Is that you have to sometimes put effort into. Take a step back is what a lot of people say, but you have to push that hand away from your face so you can actually take in everything and not lose focus on the bigger picture and get so inundated with the issue at hand, the one issue that is eating you up, that will not get you out of bed, that will not get you to be able to communicate with your employer or your significant other. It's not it now. And in it for the long haul, sometimes you can't see the long haul because all you're doing is seeing the fact that everything is all fucked up right now, and you're so miserable, and you forget the past, you forget what you used to have as a future, that foundation that was building skyscraper. You can't do that until you actually, to a lot of people, it's take a step back, but it's push the hand away from your face and make sure that you can easily adjust and actually see the whole picture.
Well, so without looking at the comments,
Okay.
Ian Anderson put something out there, and Ian was in the military, but this is something that I had also heard. Ian's looking at the comments and cheating, but he brought up the he brought up the example of shooting a pistol. You have a rear sight, a front sight, and a target.
Okay.
What is supposed to be your point of focus?
The target?
I don't know.
It's actually supposed to focus on the front sight,
That makes sense. Middle ground.
but so the rear sight post, like you can still line that up with the front sight.
So it's a little fuzzy on the two.
So the rear sights are a little fuzzy.
Yeah.
You're focused on the front sight, but you're also looking at where that front sight is aligned to the
Absolutely.
target.
Yeah.
So you're trying to line all three up, but you're looking at your front point of aim because that is your point of aim. You have a target and you can just sit there and point towards the target and hope to hit the target.
Yeah.
But you have to focus on what you're actually aiming, like where you're trying to aim and move and adjust that to hit the target.
Yeah.
The,
And he
target,
says,
the target's the long-term goal and object that you're trying to hit, but you're focused on what's in front of you, not what's behind you.
two things. Ian also says, Steve, sometimes you have to look at the big picture first and then bring your focus back to make sure you're seeing the path changes. Absolutely. When you're talking about that with pistols, I will say that,
It got so metaphorical.
yeah, metaphorical. And then all of a sudden, a bird flies out in front of your shot and you don't hit your target. Seen that happen on a driving range. Ray Chester, Steve, is it the same thing as taking your head out of your ass? Yes, you can't see much if your head is literally in your ass, and you have to really stretch first. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's always a conflict, and that's where we go back to balance. Honestly, is that it's always a conflict. Is that if you're only focused on yourself, it's not gonna work with another person or a job because you always are just you're too self-involved, right? I had many people that were in sales that used to work for me that would cycle through, and it was one of those things. It's like, look at the resume, and I learned as I was hiring more people is that it's like, oh, you worked for this company for 2 years, you worked for this company for 2 years. What do you think happened when they worked for us? 2 years later, they think they can do better and make more money elsewhere, and they do it again. They're probably still doing that because they always think that there is a greater opportunity. The only long haul they're in for is themselves, and they are so self-involved that they never realize that there are moving parts on both sides. And I think there's other people that do it the other way, where they're loyal to a fault, that they just stick with a relationship, they stick with a job, they stick with their whatever their daily routine is, and they never get out of it. And you see them 10 years later.
I think there's more of that.
I think there probably is more of that.
Yeah.
Well, I think what's really tragic is someone who has that long haul mentality, but
it's misplaced.
In what?
Well, I don't know about misplaced, but they ignore any of the warning signs or red flags. And they're like, no, I'm just going to stick with it. I'm going to stay in it for the long haul because, I think things will be better on the back end. But then the other party, whether it be relationship or career, the other party terminates that relationship.
Right.
And you were putting in all that effort, all that work, and you wanted it to succeed. And the other party was like, nope.
There's that fucking bird out there in front of your fucking sights. Just flew out of nowhere.
It, like Randy Johnson's fastball in that spring game years ago.
That's right.
That was going to be a great pitch until it hit that fucking pigeon.
Go ahead, Ann.
If you were able to give advice to you 20 years ago, I don't know how old you guys are, but if you could sit
old enough to do that,
you 20 years ago and tell them something and not like invest in whatever.
Buy Dogecoin. Buy Bitcoin.
Buy Bitcoin.
Bet on the Cubs in
Besides
2016 World Series.
There you go, Steve.
Advice?
Yeah. What would you tell them?
So the 20-year-old Steve.
Would you try
No,
to
don't turn around on me.
would you try to help them avoid pain? Would you try to help them find joy? Like what?
Do you want to answer it first?
No,
Of
I
course
don't.
not, of
I'm
course
going to
not.
look for ideas.
I'll go.
Okay.
Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah.
So it's kind of tough when I think about it because when I was in high school, I had a I had a career. Like I actually had a plan. Like I was going to do this after school. Then I was going to do this. And then I was going to do this. And that's what I wanted to do. And I went to a career fest when I was in high school. And I was talking to someone there about what I'd wanted to do. And they're like, well, that's not the place to go to if you want to do that. Like you need to go to this place in order to do that. And I was like, well, I don't want to go there. I was like, I want to go that direction. You want me to go here to get to there. I don't want to go to that step. So I completely abandoned that path, that career, everything. I completely abandoned that and shifted course to, what I ended up calling Plan B. And so part of me sits there and thinks, you know what, maybe I should have taken that other route, because it would have, maybe if everything worked out, it would have led me to do what I was actually passionate about at that time when I was in high school. But on the flip side, if I had taken that route, I never would have met my wife. Like I met my wife because of us working together in an industry that came about because of what I ended up doing after high school. Like going to college, getting a degree in biology and working in research for 8 years. That's how I met my wife. If I'd have gone the other direction, the two of us never would have crossed paths.
So what's the advice? Besides things happen for a reason, what's your actual advice?
Well, I mean,
it's great. I mean, that's impactful. I mean, I'll give you that.
You can either follow something you're passionate about or follow something you're good at.
Isn't that what you did?
No. Well, secondary passion. Like math and science were always my strong fields. I was always great at science and mathematics. Like those just come natural to me.
Yeah, they suck though.
And the other industry would have used mathematics and science quite a bit as well, but in a completely different field. Like I went into biology and medical research, not aeronautics.
Right.
Not flying.
Yeah.
So I think of it like the
your mom says, Victoria says, Plan B should what? See that?
Plan B to get you back to Plan A. I don't think Plan A is in the cards right now. that ship has sailed. But I think of it I've heard it called the American Idol effect. Like there are people that are passionate about singing and think they're really good at singing.
Sure.
But they actually suck. And so like they want to become a singer. They want to become an artist. And then all of a sudden they're told, no, you're just not good. Like you can't sing.
Right.
Well, now what do? Like you better have something that you're good at to fall back on and actually follow that. So I had a passion that I wanted to do, and maybe I could have, maybe I couldn't have been successful at that. But when something came up that told me I couldn't do the path I wanted to do, I still went and pursued something I enjoyed.
What is the advice you would give yourself 20 years ago?
See,
that was the question from Anne.
But the problem, like I said, the problem.
No. Just answer the question.
Shut up.
Well, I mean, you've been talking. You've just been going around saying that things work out for a reason.
No, the problem with that is if I
keep on trucking. Is that
Mom
where you're
says
at?
advice to 17-year-old you.
There you go.
Senior, probably. Right.
I'd have been 17, so
okay.
I'd have been getting ready. At this point, would have been getting ready to go into my senior year of high school.
Okay, rising senior.
I mean, it's tough because I sit there and I think, I could have enjoyed, I could have taken that other route and done things a little bit different way and taken that career path. But the problem with doing the whole, hindsight 2020 thing.
You're still just dancing around this fucking question. Just answer the fucking question.
No. It's hard to give a direct answer on it because
give an indirect one.
But if I had taken that career path, I would not have met my wife. Which would I rather do?
take.
But you
All right.
don't know that.
Jesus. Yeah, you don't know because
Yeah.
sometimes, so in Choose Your Own Adventure books, I've talked about this before. And I always said I always looked ahead, one step ahead. If you go to page 46 or go to page 127.
But we don't
I
get to
read
do
those.
that in real life.
She asked a question though. What advice would you give? And it can be
Well, I can tell
follow your gut like you did. I mean, like whatever it is.
I can
it's
tell
not
you-
gonna, like you and Jess, like tonight, as far as I know, like you're gonna go home to Jess. Everything's cool. Like this does not sacrifice what you have right now. The question
But
is,
Oh, I didn't
what
think about
advice?
that.
but wouldn't
Okay.
it?
No.
You don't know.
No.
And it's
you don't know.
hypothetical for Christ's sake. It's not Back to the Future for Christ's sake. Like Jesus Christ. Like no one's fading on camera right now. God damn, I feel like you're not gonna like all of a sudden you're Marty McFly in 1985.
It feels that way though.
Does it though?
It does.
I'm glad that you clued in on that because I didn't catch that at all. And I'm like, oh, he thinks if he did anything different or gave himself any advice, he wouldn't have his wife.
No,
Like,
I'm thinking that
You're not going. This is a question, a theoretical question, right? Or what?
Oh my.
Like
hypothetical.
maybe
Yeah.
theoretical, but we don't have a DeLorean parked in the garage or in the driveway right
It's
now.
not happening.
We're not going back to the future. If
The
anyone has
butterfly
it-
is not going to flap its
Oh,
wings and give 17-year-old you a little advice.
One piece of advice I'd give 17-year-old me is don't take out student loans.
All right, there
that's
you
a
go.
good
There you go.
one.
Because
That's a
goddamn, that
good
was that.
one. There you
But-
go.
But no, so I mean, I'll tell you this. So my original career path, I wanted to become a helicopter pilot.
Okay.
And so I wanted to go into the military, fly helicopters for, the contract, get out, and then either fly med flight or for a police force. Like that's what I'd wanted to do. But I had more of an inclination to do Air Force, and Air Force really doesn't do many helicopters. So they're like, no, if you want to fly helicopters, you either got to go to the Navy or the Army. And I'm like, I don't want to do that.
There you
No
go.
offense to you, Ian. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And so I completely abandoned that and went to biology. Went to college. And again, at college, I made a best friend in college that he was a groomsman in my wedding.
Okay.
And I went to his wedding. If I hadn't gone to that particular school, like I wouldn't have met him. I could have still gone to another school and gotten a degree in biology and maybe still have ended up at the same career when I graduated and maybe still have met my wife. I just don't think if I'd have taken that initial plan to the military to fly helicopters that would have led me to a path to have met my wife. And it's which would I rather do? Be married to my wife or fly helicopters? I'd rather be married to my wife.
What if you did both?
That would be great. But like I said, those two circles are so far apart.
Absolutely.
I don't think there's any Venn diagram where those two come together.
That was a lot.
All right, I'm giving my answer.
Oh god.
And I am stealing from the comments
Go ahead.
because it kind of sums up what I would say. So,
Where
so
are we
Ian
at?
is saying the advice should be to do you. It works out eventually. And I would just say to me so many years ago, like,
20
don't,
years ago was your question.
yeah, like 20 years ago, like, don't worry about every little thing because it's super fun. Like, and there's some stuff that's not fun, but
Always will be.
like you get through the stuff that's not fun, but in general, life is super fun if you make it fun.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah. Do the right thing.
Do the right thing for 20
Well,
years.
Do the
and
right
then you're
thing.
Tito's.
For
I-
20 years.
I think
You might be Tito's.
you say that. I think there are some people that make it fun in the short term
Oh, yeah.
and it doesn't work out in the long term. Like there was some stuff
Yeah.
that Steve and I saw down in Louisville
Mm-hmm.
that what you had just said made me think of. Like there were some people that we saw in Louisville that at some point probably lived for the fun in the short term.
Yeah.
Say that
And
anyway.
That's it. That's
And now
a good
they're
point.
living in a tent underneath the bridge.
Right.
Right, so-
That's actually
all
okay. So thank you for the downer, but we'll take it back to Dave
Russian
Ramsey.
Russian judge.
We're gonna take it back to Dave Ramsey, and it's about like building when you when you build the base, when you actually build on a strong foundation and you do the things that you need to do early on, you can have a lot of fun later on.
It's like a
Yes.
like a
Delayed
sunburn, right? You know, it's
gratification.
like
Right.
you build a good base on your
What?
suntan,
No, it's not like a sun.
so you don't
I'm
get burnt later.
red haired, so that doesn't
It
work for
doesn't-
me.
you don't
There's
know
no
it's all right.
base.
Ray says you'd probably have still met someone and been happy. So this is a choose your own adventure.
He's not ready to hear that.
I know he's
Ray,
not. That's why I
It's
put it up there.
possible. It's possible.
Yeah, so they would be your wife and you'd be flying helicopters. Could
I
have been
was
Jess, could have
thinking
been
that, but I didn't.
alternate universe.
He has a
Bizarro
lovely
Jess.
wife. You should meet her. She's lovely. She's actually really fun.
But when you bring that up, like it makes me sit there and go, okay, do I want to second guess all the decisions I made
so
20
you're not
years
going
ago,
back.
or do I actually want to sit there and go, you know what?
No, that's not.
I
what
got
the
things
question
pretty. I got
was.
things pretty fucking good. I'm happy with where I'm at.
So you can just tell you, like, hey, you do you.
Keep on trucking.
You the same advice. There
Keep
you
on
go.
trucking.
Things are gonna suck for some period of time.
Oh,
It's gonna be
Jesus
tough.
Steve, what you
Christ.
got?
Oh, am I allowed to answer this?
Yes.
Jesus Christ.
Here you go.
It's
Are you
similar.
going to say how old you are 20 years ago?
I was 20.
Okay.
That's why I said that earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, I was 20, right? So 20 years. So I was 20 years old. I would have been a junior / senior in college.
Mhm.
Actually had met my ex-wife at that time. Was coming off of a high school relationship. I had just switched majors, so I had a little bit figured out that I was. So when I first entered into college, so puberty hit me hard. I had this voice, you know, when that happened, and so everyone said, "Oh, you should be on the radio." I still hear that today, 20 years later, 20 plus years later, and no one knows how that works. But anyways, I was a mass comm major. Switch gears. I was a Soch major. If I could give myself advice on that part, do a double major and stick around for another year, because I got out in 4 years. Switch majors. I took in my junior year, I took 4 Soch classes, sociology classes, including Intro to Soch, which was kind of squeaked by there. I'm very happy I took all those that major. I do still use that today, the mentality, the way of thinking. But the biggest thing, and I actually agree with Ian, you, Anne, as well, is that it was something that I've done for a long time. I still struggle with I don't want to it's the hand in your face thing. Want to make other people happy, but you have to put yourself first, not to a fault, but at 20 years old, like you said, when you got married, Anne, like you were 23 years old, and like, what does a 23-year-old know? What does a 20-year-old know in college? I fucking didn't know anything. I thought I did. But I also remember it was like I wanted to get out of college, and then it was like the last 3 months of college that next year when I was 21 is that I'm like, well, shit, I'm starting to enjoy this. It was always looking for, like, I don't want to be here. I want to be here. And even now in my life, my ups and downs, I've seen this. It's like I have my own house. I had my own house at 24 also with my ex before we were married. And if I would have stuck down that path at 40 years old, her and I would have lived in a nicer, bigger house just because of how finances work, right? Mm-hmm. You ride that. Mm-hmm. Career-wise, the same way. You know, I stuck with my summer job as a mover, and I graduated college, and then I spent a decade doing levels of management, different parts of that service industry, and I learned a lot. If I could tell my 20-year-old self something, it's without losing regard to your family, friends, and people that are important to you, make sure you put yourself first. And part of that is figure out what the fuck you want tomorrow when you wake up. Like, to your point, Anne, is, you know, what do I want to do? What are my goals? And if I didn't know, which I didn't, what do you want to do after college? I don't know. I talk to people today that are literally like, 50 years old that are doing well. It's like, well, if I ask them the question, what do you want to do when you grow up? They still can't give you that answer.
Mm-mm.
The people that are like literally like, I want to retire when I'm 64 and a half, 65 and a half, so I can pull out of my 401k and I can just do this. And you're like, how was yesterday? Fucking miserable. And you're like, okay, you don't know that you're going to make it to retirement age. Are you doing what's good for you and the people that are important to you? It took me a long time to get there. Lost a job, lost a career, went through a divorce, recently went through a breakup. Lost people that are important to me, not only that are still alive, but that aren't. It's those things, like if you could tell yourself something 20 years ago, it's make sure you know what your foundation is and why it's that way. Get to know yourself, most importantly, as early as you can. That will change, but get to know yourself now and what makes you happy instead of just relying on other people. It's ironic because 20 years ago, we didn't have social media. So it literally was people around me and me thinking I need to do the right thing, but not my definition. It was purely based on what I thought I was supposed to do as opposed to what I wanted to do, and combine that with what I was supposed to do.
So you'd have a bit of an intervention with you 20 years ago?
Goddamn right. I feel like everyone should. I feel like everyone should.
With me?
I
got married 20 years ago.
All right, that got personal. No. No, but there were other aspects of your life.
Yeah.
So to Nate's point, like you met your 20,
right.
All right, 20-year marriage. All right, that was fraying.
It was. I do remember being in the back of the church though, and there's a point where they leave the bride alone, and I'm sitting. There's a door like where you can just escape.
Runaway Bride.
It's like
Julia
off,
Roberts.
Oh, great movie, great movie. And I remember standing there, and I'm like, I could just leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like
didn't.
I didn't.
Here we
I
are 20
didn't.
years later.
Yeah. There we are.
It wasn't just about one specific thing. That's
Yeah.
my point. Is it's more general. It's you make your decisions, the things you're confident in.
Mhm.
You hopefully that stuff will work out.
Yeah.
And I get what Nate was saying about the fact that it's like he kept going back to the most important pillar in his life right now, which is his wife, which is super sweet.
Aw.
And Anne, you too, 20 years later, like 20 years ago, like it's that thing. It's like you have this pillar in your life that's one aspect and it's huge.
Yeah.
But there are other things that we've gone through in 20 years, health, career,
Right.
mental health. It's so much. So that's where it's like, if I was to give myself advice 20 years ago, it is take care of yourself first, because it's one of those things we always use this metaphor is that if the plane's going down, what do they say? Put your mask on before you put the masks on people that are around you, because you won't be able to do that if you don't take care of yourself first. Same thing with health, whether it be physical or mental. That's my biggest thing, is that I've really learned and I've grown with that, and I still struggle with it like everyone does. But it's I would say make sure you put yourself first so that therefore you can be yourself for other people, and the benefits that you and others will reap from that is going to be tremendous and exponentially stronger than if you make sure that they're happy first. Because I think that you don't know who you're inspiring or how much of a rock of a foundation you can be for someone that literally doesn't even come to you with their problems. But if you lead by example and put yourself first, you will inspire people, including yourself some days when you are severely depressed and don't want to get out of bed. And you're like, no, I did everything right.
That's inspiring.
Every once in a while.
Every once in a while. Man, that's great.
All right, closing remarks.
Oh,
Here we are.
go.
Here we go.
Here we go.
3 hours, including intermission.
Oh.
Wow.
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
And thank you for being here.
The idea for this podcast, which was very loose, but was part of a bachelor party that we had a few weeks ago.
All right, we're not
and-
bring up detail.
Oh yeah, it was so great. But we ended up having a great dinner
Yeah.
at Watershed and a great tour at Watershed. You had the B team, but I'm
A
just
team in our book.
oh, there we go. But super excited to be here tonight, and thank you guys so much for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And of
And-
course, you always bring a great
You
selection
know,
of
I'm
whiskey.
gonna bring the stuff.
I don't think we
Have a
weren't
little bit more
expecting
of this new
this.
product
You
for
should-
a year.
Wait, so which was
Oh.
our favorite single barrel?
Well, so
I
that's
am
interesting.
not
Rate
the
the
popular
single
decision.
barrels.
Wait,
Okay, what are you?
no, so that's interesting because my lineup has actually changed
There it
Tell
is.
me.
from when we did the tasting with you.
All right, rankings.
Oh,
So-
see, you're comparing things.
No, it's fine.
If I'm doing so, forget the old fashioned,
Yep,
forget the
yep.
no chino.
Right.
The other 5 bottles,
Oh, you're bringing in single barrels with that.
single barrels with the new 4-year and the bottled and bond.
I mean, they're different
Right.
price points and they're different products.
They
but
are.
okay.
I'm talking
okay.
about purely on taste
All right.
and enjoyment.
All right, all right.
It has changed for me.
Oh boy. Tell me.
All right.
more.
I'm still going number 1, bottled and bond.
Over your King Chambers.
Even back then, bottled and bond was still my
Okay.
number 1.
Okay.
Bottled and Bond, number 1.
All right. Where it changes
Mm.
is my number 2 after drinking all of 5 of these.
Yeah.
My number 2 is now sugar and spice.
Oh, very nice. You know what?
At the time, I liked King Chambers the most, and that's why I bought a bottle of it. But after having them again, so I had the 3 single barrels after having the bottled and bond and the bourbon.
Mhm.
The King Chambers moves up into my number 2 spot.
Whoa.
My
Not
number
expensive.
3, which when I was doing initially when we were doing the tasting, I was just ranking. I'll get there.
I'm
I-
okay.
Like I was just initially when we did the tasting a couple weeks ago, I was just doing the 3 single barrels.
Yes.
I was comparing those 3.
Mhm.
So for me, it goes bottled and bond, sugar and spice, the new 4-year, then King Chambers, and then ODB.
Wow.
Man, King Chambers. Every time I taste it, I just like it so much. And sugar and spice.
So different.
And bottled and
They were
Bond. But
so, they were so different, but
Yeah.
for some reason tonight, the sugar and spice just hit a different palate
Yep.
than what it did a couple weeks ago.
Did it channel that inner Russell's Reserve G Rick House?
Just
That's what I was looking
don't
for.
I can't go specific,
Okay,
specific
okay.
Rick House,
Well,
but
you know,
Present
but-
company probably
no,
had
ju-
an influence on that.
there we go.
no, it didn't. But no, just the, it had a thicker, even though it wasn't,
Mhm.
like I said, when we did those 3, I liked the King Chambers a little more because I
Mhm.
felt it went down smoother, even though it's the higher proof of the 3. I thought it went down a little bit smoother, and it still did, but the sugar and spice just had more depth of flavor and a richer flavor.
Yes. Big boy bourbon from the ladies.
From the ladies.
Yes.
Answer your own question then. What's your ranking?
Oh, my ranking? Ugh, gosh. All right. So, oh, I have to even rank like bottled and bond.
That's what Nate did.
Oh
I
man,
don't know.
it depends on the occasion. So I love bottled and bond.
Mhm.
Who's dancing around the subject now?
Me. I do love it. It's great. I'll pour it for everybody. This is me personally. This is not me, Watershed. This is me
But-
personally.
Well, it's
I
where
love
we're at here.
single barrels. I love tasting bourbon straight out of the barrel and the different
So different.
personalities and the different flavor profiles and talking about them and comparing them. And that to me is the fun of bourbon.
Right.
So, but there's some bad single barrels out there. So,
Yeah, that's why you
I
put
mean,
it in the other ones.
it's kind of what?
That's why you blend it with something else.
No.
All right,
Like
all right.
not for different flavor
Are
profiles
these
here.
the only 3 single barrels you have active right now? Or are you doing
Yeah. Yeah. So we
for
did
private groups or restaurants?
we
Bars, rather.
we do like it's we have a certain number that we'll do each year, and
Yeah.
it basically goes back to how many we have coming of age.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah. So it's we need to make sure that we have enough good barrels, enough. You can't just
For
be
your
like,
everyday
here's
products,
our
first of all.
right,
Yeah.
right. You have to
Yeah.
have enough variation, so it's better to kind of make sure you're on solid footing than just like
Like the conversation about
I know
foundation.
long
Oh,
haul,
wow.
right?
Wow.
But yeah, I love single barrel. I love barrel strength bourbon. I'm really happy with our bottled and bond. I do love our blended bourbon.
I go back
It's
to what
90 proof.
I
It's
know.
just Sunday sipper.
and I go back to it.
Grandma's coming over.
Grandma's coming over.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's just really easy.
Grandma was a gin drinker.
Yeah.
Yeah. When she came to town, she was in the back of a taxi with beef eaters and from the hotel, and she's like, "Well, you guys gave us drink tickets."
Your grandma's way more fun.
Yeah. Grandma cider.
I
was a
didn't have that
saint.
grandma's.
Closing remarks, for
Yeah.
Christ's sake. Jesus.
Yeah, here you go.
No, not me.
We did ours.
No,
No,
we
your
didn't.
closing
Oh, we
remarks
still
about the
haven't
whiskey.
closed
No,
it.
we're
Oh.
going back to.
We're talking about the
In for the
topic.
long
We're talking about
haul.
the topic.
Oh,
Here we go.
all right.
All right, Anne, you want to start? Or you want Nate to start?
I will start because
we go.
I am brief, and I will say when we did our little cheers and everything, and I'm totally stealing this from Dr. Laura, and it goes. I did it for our cheers, but it was basically choose wisely and treat kindly. So it's a relationship advice, but it's true. Like choose the right person and treat them well.
I think the second
Cheers.
part is even more important.
Oh yeah, because you can choose a great person and then get kind of lazy.
There you go.
It's easy to get lazy.
It can be.
It can be. I mean, it is.
You can still fuck up a good choice.
I know.
Yeah.
I hate making the bed, but like it matters to him.
There you go.
So if I'm last out, I'll
There's a
make the
t-shirt.
bed. That's all.
Nate, how about you? Closing remarks here.
So in it for the long haul. No shortcuts.
Ooh.
Like, if you want to have something sturdy, something that's going to last a long time, you
Buy Amish.
you can't. Why buy Amish?
Solid.
Because it's solid.
No shortcuts.
I had a friend of mine. Who had posted a while back ago. He's in construction, and he had posted pictures of the grains on a 2x4 from a house built in the early 1900s versus a house built 100 years later.
Wow.
And you can see so much more spacing in the rings on that newer 2x4 than you did 100 years ago. So that wood from 100 years ago was a little bit more dense, a little bit more solid. And that's why they say that's one of the reasons why some houses built long ago stand the test of time versus some newer ones. Why? Because it was built with stronger materials. It had a better foundation. It wasn't just some cookie cutter home put up in a week. I remember the first house that me and my mom moved into after she'd gotten remarried. Like there was one day we were driving by the lot and it was just a hole in the ground. 2 days later, there's a frame up. And, don't know that house is going to be there in long term. It might, but I do know that my wife's grandmother's house, which was built in the 1800s, that house is still up and running. Like everything still works in that house. Why? It was built a little bit more solid, had a little bit better foundation. They didn't take shortcuts because they weren't trying to just put it up as quickly as they could. They were more concerned about quality than they were quantity.
Integrity.
Integrity. That's another good term for that.
Yep.
So we hear about, especially with younger generation and certain other things like stock market stuff. We hear about get rich quick, overnight successes. But then the story you told, kind of based off what Anne said, like, oh yeah, after 20 years they became an overnight success.
That was Anne's thing with Tito's. Yeah,
it's like, no, it's not an overnight thing. Like, they put a lot of work and effort into it, and then it became successful. But there was a lot of work that went into it. And I think with a lot of things in our lives, if you want to have a good quality outcome at the end of the train or at the end of the journey, like, you got to have a quality start.
Okay.
And sometimes if you sit there and go, oh yeah, I'm going to take this shortcut, it may look shorter on paper, but that doesn't mean the journey is actually going to be shorter. It doesn't mean the journey is going to be smoother. It may be a rougher road.
Right.
So you have to think about where you want to, where you want to go, where you want to be, like, what is the end game? How do you get there? One of the things I brought up on the ride back home is sometimes you sacrifice those immediate gratifications or those immediate pleasures for the long-term gains, for the long-term success. So kind of like with whiskey, instead of just sitting there pumping out 2-year product all the time, you're sitting there waiting a little bit longer, letting it mature a little bit more, letting it get a little bit more flavor, and you're getting a better quality product at the end.
Yeah.
And that's what you're putting out. That's what you're building your reputation and your namesake on.
It's good. We need to have a cheers at the end. So what are we doing here?
I actually still have a little bit of that bottle and bond that I poured
You're
before.
gonna do suicide?
I've been pacing myself, so
I'll take
yeah.
I'll take some of that suicide.
Here you go.
We can.
It is a mixture of everything we've had tonight.
Lord.
There you go.
You just went
Oh, here. You can have some
it's
of
already
mine.
gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a big one.
Yeah, well, it's not those.
Yeah. It's medium.
Interesting. Because you talk about like the houses and stuff like that. Right now we're in the spike of lumber costs. And we are very, very, I think with houses, we're threatened that soon enough there's going to be, all right, so we're not going to use like real lumber.
Oh,
it's probably going to happen. There's going to be another wave of houses that are going to crumble. Go ahead, Ann.
What about bourbon barrels?
Yep.
I mean, think about
what'd
that.
you say?
What about bourbon barrels?
Oh,
Yeah.
Luckily, in the bourbon industry, I know smaller distilleries like yourself. You said like local, not the big boys that own everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll probably raise prices.
Yeah.
Everything's going to raise. Everything has raised in prices.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that to me, with bringing whiskey in it for the long haul, is Watershed has done something that is some people look at it as like an ode to the old way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes the tried and true is very important because it is tried and true and it works, right? Nate, you talk about it's sometimes, not always. You don't want to just shut it off to something newer, right?
Right.
But when you see the in the whiskey world, right?
Mm-hmm.
You pressurize it, you do smaller barrels, you put it wherever.
Yeah.
It doesn't taste right.
Now,
To the ones that are the traditional
right.
drinkers, like tasters, like that is a different product.
Mm-hmm.
So stop trying to call it the same thing, right? Same thing with the houses. We are all right. So we're all of similar ages, right? And that question that you had, Anne, of what would you tell yourself 20 years ago? There are people that are younger than us out there that are listening. There are people that are older than us that are listening. And it doesn't matter what it is. Parents don't understand, and also your kids don't understand. It is how it works. The great equalizer is time. And in it for the long haul, it'll be whiskey. Maybe someone's going to come across something that's going to just be like, I can reciprocate like this flavor, this product, and I can get it out to you in 6 months. And there's going to be some purists. I know you're going to say no. I understand that.
No, maybe.
Then it can't be bourbon.
PV equals NRT is a thing. Come on.
I am not smart enough to understand that, but
Science majors.
I was a liberal arts major.
Bet you had more fun.
20 years ago, if I could tell
Engineer.
myself, have more fun. No, so in it for the long haul. All these things, it absolutely is that. It is sometimes you don't always question things, but also know what you're questioning. Because if you're just questioning things because you're pissed off that you're not happy with the way things are, it doesn't work. You have to educate yourself with the past because people have done things before you. That's a harsh reality. I had that with my parents. I had that with my dad. I had that with career, everything. And now at 40 years old, it's yes, hindsight is 20/20. You said, Nate, that it's tough to look at that as hindsight is 20/20 because you don't know if you would have met your wife. I don't know if I would have had the same path. I enjoy the memories of the last 20 years. And there are things I would have done differently if I would have known then what I know now. I think the question is, if you're in it for the long haul, and if you are, so for those listeners out there that are in the ballpark of 40 years old, 30 years old, 50, 60, whatever, what are you telling yourself now? What advice are you giving yourself based on your past so that when you are 20 years in advance, you think that you are giving yourself good advice? That's how you do the Tito's thing that you talked about, Anne. When you're talking to your mentor before you came in here, is how do you get that overnight success 20 years from now? How do you get to that point, right? So what advice would you give yourself now so that hopefully your 5, 10, 15, 20-year-old self, if you make it that long, because we never know, but if you make it that long, are you giving yourself advice today? And that speaks to the point of, what did your mentor say about?
Do the right thing.
Right.
Every day. Day after
Absolutely.
day.
So when you get to that point in life of if you're in it for the long haul, no matter what that means, but if you're in it for the long haul, when you get to that every morning when you wake up, no matter if you're in a bad mood, good mood, you feel healthy, you're hungover, because you do a Wednesday night podcast in your garage, and you have guests that bring over a lot of bottles. No, point is that, yeah, you do the right thing. So that's the biggest thing, is that as you learn from all this, is that might be a good perspective to give to yourself and the people around you, is that, where do we want to be? And that interview question that always bugs me, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I hate that.
It's garbage.
No one got that right
That's
5 years ago, by the way.
Garbage.
It's garbage.
Yeah.
So you refrain from that. If you rephrase that question, and if I ever get in that position again, in the cigar shop, I don't have it anymore. I did hundreds of interviews a year in my previous career. Change that question of, where do you see yourself in 5 years, to what we're talking about is, what advice would you give yourself now, 5 years from now? That little tweak of semantics as far as how you ask that, I think would absolutely change the mentality and the way of thinking of, there's a self-analysis there and where you're at right now. Because now, where do you see yourself? I'm gonna do well here. I'm make more money. I'm going to provide for my family. It's like, no. Fast forward. What would you tell yourself now? Do the right thing. Treat people right. Make sure I'm taking care of myself, that I'm making a good paycheck. It's semantics, but it's literally a change of mentality and a way of thinking of you have to, if you're in it for the long run, that start now. And you can't predict the future because you're gonna mess up, you're gonna fuck up, you're gonna make mistakes, and you're gonna slip, whether it be on your diet, whether it be on decisions, whatever it is. But if you say 5 years, and I encourage anyone out there that does interviews, right? So I used to do them a lot, and it's change that question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? The answer to that is go fuck yourself, because you don't know.
There it is.
There it
Cheers.
is. Everyone drink.
Cheers. Cheers.
5 years from now, and you had a great question. Change that interview question to 5 years from now. What advice would you give yourself today?
It's great. Stealing that.
You should.
I really am. I'll make it part of the interview.
I mean, I'm telling you that's a big change of perspective. In it for the long haul, you got to take care of yourself first, because you can't take care of other people if you don't take care of yourself first. And if you do that, now all of a sudden you can take care of other people, and you know that you deserve communication and that worth from other people. But it's all based on your self-worth, because you don't know what you deserve from other people until you realize what you yourself think that you're worth. And that's that 5 years. Where do you see yourself, and scale it back. It's coming up with a business plan. It's coming up with your future goals, and you see your goal and work backwards from that, other than doing what most people do. And I've done it before, is where do I see myself in 5 years? I'd like to have this. Sounds great. How do you get there? No fucking idea. So that's where you have to work yourself back. And with that, I'll say, guys,
Cheers.
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 Happy with, is that an empty glass?
Huh?
Do you have an empty glass?
No, this is not empty.
Just a tiny bit.
All right, cheers. Guys, happy Whiskey Wednesday. We'll see you next week. Anne, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That's amazing. Nate's already taking his. All right.
I feel like you were judging me there.
Never.
Come on, mouse.
Yeah, no, it's dead.
Ah.
We
How do
might-
you, my wife just commented, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
She knew it.
I think that was Shel Silverstein.
NRT was.
She